The taste of human blood ignites a firestorm of sensation in Astra's body, her blue skin flushing deep indigo as euphoria floods her system. One accidental drop during a routine blood draw, and the Bolian nurse finds herself addicted to a substance she never knew existed. In the sterile confines of Bolia's premier xenobiology hospital, Astra's trembling hands fumble with the vial containing Darren Coleman's blood sample. The human diplomat, here to negotiate a critical trade agreement, watches with concern as the nurse's composure crumbles. "Are you all right?" Darren asks, his brow furrowing as Astra's eyes dilate, her breath coming in short gasps. I'm fine," Astra manages, her voice strained. "Please excuse me." She bolts from the room, leaving Darren bewildered on the examination table. The corridor blurs as Astra races to find Dr. John, her superior and the hospital's chief xenobiologist. Her mind reels, trying to process the intense rush still coursing through her veins. Dr. John looks up from his datapad as Astra bursts into his office. "Nurse Astra? What's the meaning of this?" "Doctor," Astra pants, "something's happened. The human blood, I accidentally tasted it. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced." Dr. John's antennae twitch with interest. "Explain." As Astra recounts the incident, Dr. John's expression shifts from curiosity to excitement. He immediately orders a full analysis of Darren's blood sample, his fingers flying over the lab's control panel as he inputs commands. Hours pass as the advanced Bolian medical systems process the human blood. Astra paces the lab, her skin still tingling from the encounter. Finally, the computer chimes, results flooding the holographic display. Dr. Jean's eyes widen as he scans the data. Fascinating, it appears human blood contains compounds that act as powerful stimulants to our neural receptors. This could change everything. Without hesitation, Dr. Jean activates a secure channel to the Bolian High Council. As he relays the discovery, Astra watches the counselor's expressions morph from skepticism to intrigue. "This information must remain confidential," the lead counselor decrees. "Nurse Astra, you are to monitor the human closely, gather more data. We may have found a significant advantage in our negotiations." As the transmission ends, Astra feels a mix of excitement and unease. She's drawn to the prospect of experiencing that rush again, but the ethical implications weigh heavily on her conscience. Meanwhile, in his private quarters, Darren Coleman frowns at the encrypted message on his personal communicator. The warning from Earth's ambassador is clear. Be cautious. The Bolians are up to something. Astra takes a deep breath, steeling herself before re-entering Darren's room. As their eyes meet, she feels a pull that goes beyond the lingering effects of his blood. Darren smiles, his wariness hidden behind diplomatic charm. "Feeling better?" he asks, his voice warm despite the suspicion lurking in his mind. "Yes, thank you," Astra replies, her professionalism warring with her growing attraction. "I apologize for my abrupt departure. Now let's continue your examination, shall we?" As Astra approaches, medical scanner in hand, the air between them crackles with unspoken tension. Neither fully trusts the other, yet both feel an undeniable connection. In this moment, on the precipice of a discovery that could reshape interstellar relations, the fate of human Bolian relations balances on a knife's edge, and the intoxicating power of a single drop of blood. The night passed fitfully for both Astra and Darren, their minds consumed by the events of the previous day. As dawn broke over Bolia's capital city, Astra found herself once again standing outside Darren's room, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. She paused at the door, taking a deep breath to steady herself. As she reached for the handle, she heard muffled voices from within. Curiosity overrode her hesitation, and she leaned closer, straining to make out the words. "Aben, a sudden change in negotiation tactics," a stern voice crackled through what Astra assumed was a holographic communication. "Our sources indicate they may have discovered something of value related to humans." Astra's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the voice as Jonathan Reeves, Earth's ambassador. "I understand, Ambassador," Darren's voice replied, tense but controlled. "I'll remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity." "See that you do, Coleman. We can't afford any surprises at this stage." Reeves out, The abrupt end of the conversation spurred Astra into action. She knocked on the door, composing her features into a mask of professional calm as she entered. Darren stood by the window, his expression guarded as he turned to face her. "Nurse Astra," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you so early." "My apologies, Mr. Coleman," Astra replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm here to conduct a follow-up examination, standard procedure for off-world visitors." As she approached with her medical instruments, Astra found herself acutely aware of Darren's presence. The scent of his skin, the warmth radiating from his body, everything about him seemed heightened, more intense than before. She began the examination, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed a scanner to his chest. Darren watched her closely, his eyes never leaving her face. "You seem different today," he observed, his voice low. Astra swallowed hard, struggling to maintain her composure. "I assure you, I'm perfectly fine," she said, her words coming out more breathless than she intended. As she moved to take another blood sample, her hand brushed against Darren's arm. The contact sent a jolt through her body, causing her to fumble with the needle. In her distraction, she pricked her own finger, a drop of Darren's blood mixing with her own. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Waves of pleasure coursed through Astra's body, her blue skin flushing a deep indigo. She gasped, her knees buckling beneath her. Darren reacted instinctively, reaching out to steady her. His hands gripped her arms, the physical contact only intensifying the sensations flooding through her. "Astra!" Darren exclaimed, genuine concern evident in his voice. "What's happening? Are you all right?" Astra struggled to form words, her knees going weak from the intoxicating rush. I'm fine," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just a momentary dizziness." As she fought to regain control, Astra became acutely aware of Darren's proximity. His touch, his scent, the sound of his breathing. Everything about him seemed to call to her on a primal level. Darren, too, found himself affected by their closeness. Despite his suspicions and the warnings from Earth, he couldn't deny the attraction he felt towards the Bolian nurse. Her exotic beauty, coupled with her vulnerability in this moment, stirred something within him. For a long moment they stood frozen, caught in a tableau of mutual desire and uncertainty. Astra's eyes met Darren's, and she saw a mixture of concern, attraction, and wariness reflected in his gaze. The tension was broken by a sharp knock at the door. Dr. Jean's voice called out, "Nurse Astra, is everything all right in there?" Astra pulled away from Darren, her professional mask slipping back into place with effort. "Yes, doctor," she called back, her voice only slightly unsteady. "We're almost finished here." As Dr. Jean entered the room, Astra busied herself with her medical instruments, avoiding eye contact with both men. Darren retreated to the window, his posture tense as he regarded the Bolian doctor. Dr. Jean's antennae twitched as he surveyed the scene, his keen eyes noting the flushed state of Astra's skin and the tension in Darren's shoulders. "Nurse Astra, I need to speak with you in the corridor," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. As Astra followed Dr. Jean out of the room, she cast one last glance at Darren. The human diplomat's face was a study in conflicting emotions, attraction, suspicion, and a hint of something deeper that Astra couldn't quite name. In the sterile hallway, Dr. Jean pulled Astra aside, his voice low and urgent. "The High Council has given us new orders," he said, pressing a small device into her hand. "We need more detailed biometric data from the human. Use this to gather the information discreetly." Astra stared at the device, her mind racing. The euphoria from her contact with Darren's blood was fading, replaced by a gnawing sense of guilt and confusion. As Dr. Jean hurried away, Astra leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She was torn between her duty to her people and her growing feelings for Darren. The weight of her secret mission pressed down on her, threatening to crush her beneath its burden. Inside his room, Darren paced restlessly, his mind working overtime. The attraction he felt towards Astra was undeniable, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than met the eye. He determination to use this connection to his advantage, to uncover whatever secret the Bolians were hiding. As night fell over the alien world, the hospital hummed with unseen activity. In the maintenance tunnels, Agent Marcus Steele moved silently, gathering intelligence on the Bolians' clandestine operations. In his lab, Dr. Jean and his team worked feverishly to synthesize the compound found in human blood, unaware of the Earth operative closing in on their secret. And in her quarters, Astra sat alone, staring at the biometric device in her hands. Tomorrow she would see Darren again. Tomorrow she would have to choose between her people and the human who had, in such a short time, come to mean so much to her. The stage was set for a collision of worlds where the boundaries between duty and desire, trust and betrayal, would be tested to their limits. As Bolia's 3 moons rose in the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the cityscape, the fate of 2 species hung in the balance, all hinging on the contents of a single drop of blood. Blood. The first rays of Bolia's twin suns crept through the window of Darren's room, rousing him from a restless sleep. He blinked away the remnants of uneasy dreams, his mind already racing with plans and suspicions. As he sat up, the door slid open, revealing Astra's slim figure silhouetted against the sterile corridor light. "Good morning, Mr. Coleman," she said, her voice carrying a hint of nervousness that hadn't been present the day before. "I'm here for your morning checkup." Darren's eyes narrowed imperceptibly as he noticed a small bulge in the pocket of her medical coat. He recalled the miniature surveillance camera he had carefully concealed in the room's light fixture the previous night, a precaution that now seemed prescient. "Of course, Nurse Astra," he replied, his tone carefully neutral. "Please come in." As Astra approached, Darren watched her movements closely. She seemed to be making a conscious effort to maintain a professional distance, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for something. When she reached his bedside, she pulled out a medical scanner, but Darren's attention was drawn to the moment her other hand slipped into her pocket, activating a concealed device with a barely audible click. Astra began the examination, her scanner humming softly as it passed over Darren's body. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, a mixture of attraction and suspicion that made every movement feel charged with significance. "How are you feeling today?" Astra asked, her eyes fixed on the scanner's readout. "Better, thank you," Darren responded, deliberately shifting his position so that his arm brushed against hers. The effect was immediate and intense. Astra's breath caught in her throat, her blue skin flushing a deep indigo that spread from her cheeks down her neck. She stumbled slightly, her free hand grasping the edge of the bed for support. Darren, now fully aware of the impact his touch had on her, decided to push further. He reached out, ostensibly to steady her, his hand resting on her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice permeated with feigned concern. Astra's eyes met his, wide and filled with a mixture of desire and confusion. "I'm fine," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just a little dizzy." Seizing the opportunity, Darren maintained contact under the guise of assisting her. He guided her to sit on the edge of the bed, his hand moving to the small of her back. Astra's skin seemed to burn beneath his touch, her breathing growing more rapid with each passing second. "Perhaps I should be the one examining you," Darren said softly, leaning in close. The scent of her alien perfume filled his senses, exotic and intoxicating. Astra struggled to maintain her composure, her professional mask slipping away to reveal the raw desire beneath. "Mr. Coleman, we shouldn't—" Her protest was cut short as Darren closed the distance between them, capturing her lips in a passionate kiss. For a moment, the universe seemed to narrow to this single point of contact, all thoughts of duty and suspicion swept away by a tide of primal need. The spell was broken by a sudden clatter. The concealed device had slipped from Astra's pocket, falling to the floor between them. Darren broke the kiss, his reflexes honed by years of diplomatic training, allowing him to snatch up the device before Astra could react. "Abachi, what's this?" he asked, his voice hardening as he held up the small, blinking object. Astra's face drained of color, her indigo flush replaced by a pale, sickly blue. I can explain," she stammered, reaching for the device. Darren pulled it away, his expression a mixture of anger and disappointment. "I think you'd better start talking, Nurse Astra. What exactly is going on here?" Caught between her duty and her growing feelings for Darren, Astra felt her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging with the weight of her confession. "It's a biometric data collector," she admitted, her voice barely audible. The Bolian High Council, they ordered us to gather detailed information about human physiology." Darren's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Astra's gaze dropped to the floor. "Because of what we discovered about human blood. It has a powerful effect on our species. It's addictive, intensely pleasurable. The Council sees it as a potential advantage in negotiations." As the words left her mouth, alarms suddenly blared throughout the hospital. Red emergency lights began to flash, and the sound of heavy security doors slamming shut echoed through the corridors. Dr. Jean's voice crackled over the intercom, tense and authoritative. "Attention all personnel and patients. A dangerous pathogen has been detected in the facility. We are initiating emergency quarantine protocols. Please remain in your current locations until further notice." Darren and Astra exchanged a look of mutual understanding and fear. This was no coincidence. "They know," Darren said grimly, moving to the door and finding it locked. "This is about containing the information, isn't it?" Astra nodded, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "What are we going to do?" Before Darren could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Someone was coming, and neither of them knew if it would be friend or foe. Trapped in the locked room, their options dwindling by the second, Darren and Astra found themselves at the precipice of a decision that would shape not only their own fates, but potentially the future of human-Bolian relations. The footsteps grew louder, a palpable sense of urgency in their rhythm. Darren's mind raced, weighing their limited options as he pulled Astra close, his whispered words carrying the weight of a pivotal moment in history. "We need to get out of here," he breathed, his eyes locked on the door. "Together." "We need to get out of here," Darren breathed, his eyes locked on the door. Astra nodded, her heart racing as she quickly assessed their options. "There's a maintenance access panel behind that storage unit," she whispered, gesturing to a large cabinet against the far wall. "It leads to the lower levels. We might be able to find a way out through there." Without hesitation, Darren moved to the cabinet, pushing it aside with a grunt of effort. Astra's fingers danced across the access panel's keypad, inputting a series of codes that caused it to slide open with a soft hiss. As the footsteps outside grew louder, Darren and Astra slipped into the narrow passageway, pulling the panel shut behind them. They found themselves in a dimly lit service corridor, the hum of machinery filling the air. "This way," Astra said, taking the lead. Her knowledge of the hospital's layout proved invaluable as they navigated the maze-like passages, avoiding security checkpoints and locked doors. As they moved, Darren couldn't help but notice the effect his proximity was having on Astra. Her blue skin flushed a deep indigo every time they brushed against each other in the narrow corridors. She seemed to be struggling to maintain her composure, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "Are you all right?" Darren asked, concern evident in his voice. Astra nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The intensity of her physical reaction to Darren's presence was becoming harder to ignore with each passing moment. She forced herself to focus on their escape, pushing aside the waves of desire that threatened to overwhelm her. They had just reached a junction when the sound of voices echoed from a nearby corridor. Darren pulled Astra into a small alcove, their bodies pressed close together in the tight space. Astra bit back a moan, her skin tingling where it made contact with Darren's. As a group of security officers passed by, Darren and Astra held their breath, acutely aware of their compromising position. The tension between them was palpable, a mix of fear, adrenaline, and undeniable attraction. Once the danger had passed, they continued their journey through the hospital's lower levels. Astra led them to a maintenance tunnel that she knew would take them closer to the emergency shuttle bay. As they moved through the tunnel, a sudden noise from behind caused them to freeze. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Darren instinctively moved to shield Astra. To their surprise, the newcomer raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Wait," the man said in a low voice. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Marcus Steele. I'm an undercover agent from Earth." Darren's eyes narrowed, his posture tense. "Prove it," he demanded. Steele reached into his pocket slowly, producing a small device that projected a holographic Earth government insignia. I've been investigating the Bolian's research into human blood. I intercepted a communication about Dr. Jean's secret lab. We need to secure that evidence before we escape. Astra looked between the two humans, her mind racing. The lab is on the level above us, she said, but security will be tight, especially now. Steele nodded grimly. I can create a diversion to draw them away. You two can slip in and grab whatever data you can find. Darren considered the plan for a moment before agreeing. As Steele prepared to leave, Astra hesitated, her loyalty to her people warring with her growing feelings for Darren and her sense of right and wrong. Sensing her turmoil, Darren took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her body. We'll find a solution that benefits everyone, he promised softly, but first we need to uncover the truth. With a nod of drive, Astra led them towards Dr. Jean's lab. Steele split off to initiate his diversion, leaving Darren and Astra to navigate the increasingly chaotic hospital corridors. Alarms blared as they made their way to the lab, narrowly avoiding panicked staff and security patrols. Each close call left them breathless, their hands lingering on each other for support and reassurance. When they finally reached the lab, they found it in disarray. Equipment lay shattered on the floor, and databanks blinked ominously, their contents wiped clean. Astra's keen eyes scanned the room, finally settling on a hidden safe tucked behind a fallen shelf. There, she pointed, that might be our best chance. Together they worked to access the safe, Astra's medical knowledge complementing Darren's problem-solving skills. As the safe clicked open, revealing a set of data crystals, the lab door burst open. Commander Vex stood in the doorway, flanked by his security team, their weapons trained on Darren and Astra. Hand over the crystals, Vex demanded, his voice cold and authoritative. Darren and Astra exchanged a look, their options dwindling by the second. The air crackled with tension as they faced off against the Bolian security forces, the fate of two species hanging in the balance. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. In the confusion that followed, Darren grabbed Astra's hand and the data crystals, pulling her towards the exit. They pushed past the disoriented security team, sprinting down the corridor as shouts and footsteps echoed behind them. Their hearts pounding, they raced towards the emergency shuttle bay, every step bringing them closer to freedom and to an uncertain future that would test the limits of their growing bond and the challenges that lay ahead. As they burst into the shuttle bay, alarms blaring around them, Darren's eyes locked onto their target, a sleek Bolian shuttle, its engines already humming with pre-flight checks. They sprinted across the hangar, Agent Steele covering their six as security forces poured in behind them. Go! Steele shouted, laying down suppressing fire. I'll hold them off. Darren hesitated for a split second before Astra grabbed his arm, her touch sending a jolt through his system. We have to move, she urged, her indigo skin flushed with exertion and almost unchecked desire. They dashed up the shuttle's ramp, Darren sliding into the pilot's seat as Astra worked to override the security lockouts. The shuttle's systems came to life under her expert touch, and Darren felt a surge of admiration for her skills. Steele, we're good to go, Darren called over the comms. The agent backed into the shuttle, the ramp closing behind him as blaster fire peppered the hull. With a roar of engines, the shuttle lifted off, rocketing out of the bay and into the inky blackness of space. For a moment, they allowed themselves to breathe, the adrenaline high giving way to a fleeting sense of relief. That relief was short-lived. The shuttle's sensors blared a warning as multiple signatures appeared on their tail. Bolian military vessels, Astra reported, her voice tight. They're in pursuit. Darren's mind focused as he pushed the shuttle's engines to their limit. I'll take weapons, he said, fingers dancing over the controls. Astra, you're our best pilot. Take the helm. She nodded, sliding into the seat he vacated. As their hands brushed, another wave of intense attraction washed over them, nearly overwhelming in its intensity. They locked eyes for a moment, the air between them electric, before forcing themselves to focus on the task at hand. The pursuing Bolian ships opened fire, energy beams grazing the shuttle's shields. Darren returned fire, his shots precise and calculated. One of the Bolian vessels veered off, trailing smoke and debris. "Nice shot," Steele commented, working furiously at a communications panel. "I'm trying to establish a secure channel with Earth's nearest outpost. We need backup and fast." Astra's piloting skills proved invaluable as she guided them through a dense debris field, using the floating wreckage as cover. The shuttle bucked and weaved, narrowly avoiding collisions as Bolian fire continued to rain down around them. Suddenly, the shuttle shuddered violently, alarms blaring as systems fluctuated. Astra reached for an exposed panel, trying to reroute power when a sharp edge sliced into her palm. She hissed in pain, blue blood welling from the cut. Darren instinctively reached out to steady her, his sweat-slicked hand coming into contact with her wound. The moment their blood mixed, a jolt of pure electricity seemed to arc between them. Astra gasped, her eyes widening as she met Darren's gaze. The attraction between them, already intense, suddenly became nearly unbearable. I can't," Astra stammered, her breath coming in short gasps. Darren felt it too, his entire body humming with an urgent need to touch her, to be closer. "Focus," Steele's sharp voice cut through the haze of desire. "We're not out of this yet." With Herculean effort, Darren and Astra tore their attention back to their tasks. Astra's fingers trembled as she navigated through the debris field, while Darren struggled to keep his aim steady on the weapons console. "I've made contact," Steele announced, relief evident in his voice. "Earth outpost on Rigel 7. They're offering sanctuary, but it could spark a diplomatic incident." "We don't have much choice," Darren grunted, firing another volley at their pursuers. As they approached Rigel 7, the Bolian pursuit intensified. A new voice crackled over their comms, cold and authoritative. "This is Commander Vex. Surrender immediately or face total annihilation." Darren's mind raced, assessing their dwindling options. His eyes fell on the shuttle's warp core readouts, an idea forming. "The warp core," he said, turning to Astra. "If we could create a shockwave, it might disable their ships long enough for us to reach Rigel 7's protection." Astra's eyes lit up with understanding. "Our blood," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The mixture, it could catalyze the reaction, amplify the effect." Steele looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "Are you sure about this?" Another blast rocked the shuttle. The decision made for them. Darren nodded grimly. "It's our only chance." As Steele took over piloting, Darren and Astra moved to the rear of the shuttle. Their proximity sent waves of pleasure coursing through their bodies, making it difficult to concentrate. With shaking hands, they carefully mixed their blood in a small vial. "Ready?" Darren asked, his voice husky with barely suppressed desire. Astra nodded, her skin flushed a deep indigo. Together, they injected the mixture into the warp core's fuel intake. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The warp core pulsed with energy, a blinding light filling the shuttle. A massive shock wave erupted from their position, engulfing the pursuing Bolian ships. As the light faded, they found themselves drifting in space, just outside Rigel 7's orbit. Emergency power flickered on, revealing the shuttle's interior, now permeated with a strange, shimmering mist. "What is that?" Steele asked, wrinkling his nose at the sweet, intoxicating scent filling the air. Astra's eyes widened in realization. "A pheromone," she breathed, "a byproduct of the blood reaction." The effect on Darren and Astra was profound. Their mutual attraction now a living, breathing thing between them. They gravitated towards each other, every fiber of their beings crying out for contact. Steele's voice seemed to come from far away as he reported on their situation. Failing life support, Admiral Frost dispatching a rescue team, Commander Vex's final warning, declaring them fugitives. But for Darren and Astra, the universe had narrowed to just the two of them. As they waited for rescue, fighting against the shuttle's deteriorating systems and their own overwhelming desires, they made a pact. "We'll find a solution," Darren promised, his hand intertwining with Astra's. "Together." Astra nodded, her eyes shining with persistence and something deeper, more profound. "Together," she echoed. As the rescue ships approached, they knew their journey was just the beginning. The challenges of interstellar politics, potential prosecution, and the ongoing mystery of the human-Bolian blood interaction loomed before them. But in that moment, with the heat of their combined touch searing through them, those challenges seemed surmountable. The Earth vessel's tractor beam locked onto their shuttle just as the last of their life support failed. As they prepared to board, Darren, Astra, and Agent Steele exchanged knowing looks. Whatever came next, they would face it united, bound by shared secrets and the promise of a future yet to be written. The rescue ship's tractor beam pulled the damaged shuttle into its cavernous docking bay. As the airlock hissed open, a team of hazmat-suited personnel rushed in, surrounding Darren, Astra, and Agent Steele. "This way, quickly," a muffled voice ordered, ushering them towards a sealed corridor. The trio stumbled forward, still reeling from their ordeal. Darren's hand found Astra's, their fingers intertwining instinctively. Even through the protective gloves of their rescuers, the contact sent shivers of pleasure coursing through their bodies. They were led directly to a sterile medical bay, its stark white surfaces a stark contrast to the chaos they'd just escaped. A tall woman in a crisp medical uniform approached, her piercing gaze taking in the disheveled group. "I'm Dr. Elena Vaughn, Chief Medical Officer," she introduced herself, gesturing to separate examination tables. "We need to run full decontamination protocols and a battery of tests." As Darren and Astra were directed to opposite sides of the room, they exchanged a longing glance. The physical separation felt like a physical ache, their bodies crying out for proximity. Dr. Vaughn began her examination, her eyes widening as she observed their vital signs. "Fascinating," she murmured, noting the elevated heart rates and dilated pupils. Her gaze lingered on Astra's skin, which had taken on a deeper, more vibrant indigo hue. "What's happening to us?" Darren asked, his voice hoarse. The doctor's brow furrowed. "It appears the mixture of your blood has produced a pheromone-like substance. It's creating a powerful biochemical bond between you two." Before she could elaborate, the medical bay doors slid open. A statuesque woman with steel-gray hair and the bearing of a seasoned warrior strode in, her uniform adorned with the insignia of an admiral. "Admiral Helena Frost," she announced crisply. "I need a full debrief on what exactly happened out there." Agent Steele stepped forward, producing the data crystals they'd retrieved from Dr. Jean's lab. "Ma'am, these contain vital information on the Boolean research into human blood. I believe it's crucial we analyze this data immediately." Admiral Frost's eyes narrowed as she took the crystals. "Understood. I'll have our science team start working on it right away." She turned to address the entire room. "I should inform you that the Boolean government has already issued formal protests. They're demanding your immediate extradition." Astra gasped, her indigo skin paling slightly. Darren felt a surge of protectiveness, wanting nothing more than to cross the room and comfort her. "What are our options?" he asked, forcing himself to focus on the diplomatic implications. Admiral Frost's expression was grim. "Earth's diplomatic corps is working around the clock, but this has the potential to escalate into a full-blown interstellar incident. For now, we're setting course for Earth. Direct negotiations between our governments seem to be our best option." As the Admiral spoke, Dr. Vaughn continued her examination. She collected blood samples from both Darren and Astra, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. "Admiral," the doctor interjected, "my preliminary analysis suggests that the compound in human blood could potentially be synthesized into a powerful treatment for certain Boolean neurological disorders. This could significantly impact our negotiations." Admiral Frost nodded thoughtfully. "Good work, Doctor. Keep me informed of any further developments." She turned to address Darren and Astra directly. "For your safety and the crew's, you'll be assigned separate quarters for the duration of our journey to Earth. Lieutenant Commander Jackson will oversee security protocols." As if on cue, a stern-faced officer entered the medical bay. "Ma'am," he acknowledged the Admiral before turning to Darren and Astra. "If you'll follow me, I'll escort you to your quarters." Darren felt a wave of panic at the thought of being separated from Astra. Their eyes met across the room, a silent communication passing between them. The pull between them was nearly visible, an electric current humming in the air. As they were led out of the medical bay, Darren's mind raced. The implications of their situation were staggering, not just for them personally, but for interstellar relations as a whole. He knew that the journey to Earth would be fraught with challenges, both external and internal. The corridors of the ship buzzed with activity as they passed. Crew members stopped to stare, whispers following in their wake. Darren could feel the mix of curiosity and apprehension directed at Astra, the first Bolian many of them had ever seen. They reached a junction where the corridor split. Lieutenant Commander Jackson gestured to the left. "Mr. Chen, your quarters are this way." He pointed to the right. "Ms. Astra, you'll be staying in the guest suite down this hall." Darren and Astra hesitated, their bodies instinctively leaning towards each other. The security officer's stern gaze left no room for argument. "We'll figure this out," Darren said softly, his eyes locked on Astra's. "I promise." Astra nodded, her expression a mix of longing and drive. As they parted ways, Darren felt as if a piece of himself was being torn away. He entered his assigned quarters, the door sliding shut behind him, with a sense of finality. Alone in the sterile room, Darren's skin tingled with phantom sensations. He could still feel Astra's touch, smell her unique scent. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath, trying to center himself. The ship's engines hummed to life, the subtle vibrations signaling their departure from Rigel 7. As they began their journey to Earth, Darren knew that the true challenges, diplomatic, scientific, and personal, were only just beginning. The ship's gentle hum filled the silence of Darren's quarters as he paced restlessly, his mind racing with the implications of their situation. A chime at his door startled him from his thoughts. "Mr. Chen, please report to the medical bay immediately," Dr. Vaughn's voice came through the intercom. Darren's heart raced as he made his way through the corridors. He spotted Astra being escorted from the opposite direction, her indigo skin seeming to shimmer under the harsh lighting. Their eyes met, and a jolt of electricity passed between them. Dr. Vaughn stood in the center of the medical bay, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. "We've made a significant discovery," she announced as Admiral Frost entered the room. "The prolonged exposure to the mixed blood pheromones is causing cellular changes in both of you." Astra's eyes widened. "What kind of changes?" "Enhanced physical abilities," Dr. Vaughn explained, pulling up holographic displays of their cellular structures. "Increased strength, stamina, and sensory perception. It's quite remarkable." Admiral Frost's brow furrowed as she studied the data. "Doctor, what are the potential implications of this?" "The military and medical applications could be groundbreaking," Dr. Vaughn replied, "but we need to conduct further research to fully understand the extent of these changes." Admiral Frost nodded decisively. "Set up a secure laboratory on the ship. You'll lead a small team to continue studying these effects." She turned to Lieutenant Commander Jackson. "Increase security measures around Mr. Chen and Ms. Astra. They're to be treated as both valuable assets and potential biohazards." As the days passed, Darren and Astra found themselves subjected to rigorous daily examinations. Each test revealed new aspects of their evolving physiology. Darren noticed he could hear conversations from several rooms away, while Astra discovered she could lift objects that would have been impossible before. Their heightened senses made their attraction to each other nearly unbearable. During one examination, their hands brushed accidentally, sending waves of pleasure cascading through their bodies. It took all their willpower to maintain composure. The ship's crew began to take notice of the changes. Whispers followed Darren and Astra as they moved through the corridors. Astra's skin had taken on an iridescent quality, shimmering with every movement. Darren's physique had become more defined, his muscles visibly toned beneath his uniform. One evening, as Darren finished a workout in the ship's gym, he overheard Agent Steele speaking urgently with the ship's intelligence officer. "We've uncovered evidence of a Bolian plot to weaponize the human blood compound," Steele said in a low voice. "This goes deeper than we thought." Darren's enhanced hearing picked up every word, his pupils dilating with the implications. The potential for interstellar conflict loomed larger than ever. As they approached the halfway point of their journey to Earth, the ship's tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Mason, burst onto the bridge. "Admiral, long-range sensors have detected an anomaly in our wake. It appears to be a cloaked vessel matching Bolian design specifications." Admiral Frost's expression hardened. "Battle stations. It seems Commander Vex has managed to track us." In the tense moments that followed, Admiral Frost made a bold decision. She summoned Darren and Astra to the bridge, assigning them to a specially formed tactical team. Your unique bond and newfound abilities may give us an advantage, she explained. We need every edge we can get. Darren found himself working alongside seasoned officers, his diplomatic skills put to the test as he integrated Astra into the team. The human crew members were initially wary, but as Astra's enhanced reflexes and keen insights proved invaluable, their attitudes began to shift. Dr. Vaughn approached Admiral Frost with a daring proposal. We could weaponize the human Boolean pheromone compound as a non-lethal deterrent, she suggested. Create a localized cloud that could temporarily incapacitate Boolean attackers through overwhelming pleasure sensations. Admiral Frost weighed the risks before giving her approval. Begin production immediately, Doctor. As the Earth vessel and the pursuing Boolean ship engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse through a treacherous asteroid field, Darren and Astra found themselves at the heart of the action. They manned a sensor station together, their heightened perception allowing them to predict and avoid incoming asteroids with uncanny accuracy. Incoming 3 o'clock, Astra called out, her fingers flying over the controls. Darren's enhanced reflexes kicked in as he adjusted the ship's course, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of space rock. The bridge crew watched in awe as the pair worked in perfect synchronization. Meanwhile, in the secured laboratory, Dr. Vaughn and her team worked tirelessly to synthesize the pheromone compound. The pressure mounted as setback after setback plagued their efforts. A transmission cut through the tension on the bridge. Commander Vex's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression a mask of cold tenacity. Surrender Astra and the research data immediately, he demanded, or face the consequences. Admiral Frost, buying time for Dr. Vaughn to complete the pheromone weapon, engaged Vex in diplomatic talks. As the conversation unfolded, a startling truth came to light. You're operating outside official channels, Admiral Frost realized. You represent a rogue faction within the Boolean government? Vex's expression flickered, confirming her suspicion. This new information presented both a challenge and an opportunity for resolving the conflict without sparking a full-scale war. Just as tensions reached a boiling point, Dr. Vaughn's voice came through the comm system. Admiral, we've stabilized the compound, but there's a complication. Deploying it requires a direct infusion of fresh human and Boolean blood. All eyes turned to Darren and Astra. They exchanged a look, a silent communication passing between them. Without hesitation, they stepped forward. We'll do it, Darren said, his voice steady. Whatever it takes. As they were led to the laboratory for the procedure, the pursuing Boolean ship closed in. The next few moments would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-Boolean relations. The weight of their decision pressed down on Darren and Astra, their enhanced senses heightening every sensation as they prepared to take this next, crucial step into the unknown. Unknown as the compound coursed through their veins, the ship's medical bay hummed with activity as Dr. Vaughn and her team prepared for the crucial procedure. Darren and Astra lay side by side on examination tables, their eyes locked in a silent exchange of reassurance and purpose. We're ready to begin, Dr. Vaughn announced, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. This process will simultaneously draw blood from both of you, mix it in our specialized chamber, and then reintroduce a small amount back into your systems. Are you prepared? Darren nodded, his lips pursed. Let's do this. Astra's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. Together, she whispered. As the extraction began, Darren felt a sharp pinch in his arm, followed by an odd sensation of warmth spreading through his body. He glanced at Astra, noticing her indigo skin seemed to shimmer more intensely than before. Suddenly, a wave of sensation crashed over him. Every nerve in his body ignited, his senses sharpening to an almost painful degree. He could hear the rapid beating of Astra's heart, smell the antiseptic tang of the medical bay with startling clarity, and feel the subtle vibrations of the ship's engines through the examination table. Beside him, Astra gasped, her back arching slightly. Her skin pulsed with an otherworldly glow, the shimmering effect intensifying with each passing second. Darren watched in awe as his own muscles seemed to ripple and define themselves further, strength coursing through his body. Dr. Vaughn monitored their vital signs. her eyes widening at the readings. Incredible, she murmured. Their physiology is adapting at an unprecedented rate. Lieutenant Commander Jackson stepped forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. Doctor, are they stable? Stable, yes, Dr. Vaughn replied, her gaze fixed on the monitors. But their readings are off the charts. Heart rates, neural activity, cellular regeneration. It's all far beyond normal parameters for either species. As the procedure neared its completion, Darren's mind exploded with newfound clarity. Information processed at lightning speed, connections forming between disparate thoughts and memories. He turned to look at Astra and found her staring back, a look of wonder on her face. I can feel you, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Your thoughts, your emotions, they're as clear as my own. Before Darren could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Admiral Frost's voice crackled over the intercom. All hands to battle stations. Commander Vex's ship has decloaked and is approaching rapidly. Dr. Vaughn quickly disconnected them from the equipment. You're clear, she said, handing a vial of the synthesized pheromone compound to a waiting tactical officer. How do you feel? Darren sat up, marveling at the absence of dizziness or fatigue. Ready, he said, surprised by the strength in his own voice. Astra stood beside him, her movements fluid and graceful. We need to get to our positions, she said, her mind already strategizing. They hurried to the equipment bay where specialized environmental suits awaited them. As they donned the suits, Darren marveled at how they seemed to amplify his newfound abilities. Every movement felt precise, powerful, and perfectly controlled. Darren, Astra, Admiral Frost's voice came through their comm units. I need you to lead our defense team. Your enhanced abilities give us an edge we desperately need. Protect critical areas and be prepared to deploy the pheromone weapon if necessary. Understood, Admiral, Darren replied, exchanging a determined look with Astra. They made their way through the ship's corridors, their enhanced senses on high alert. As they approached their designated position near the main engineering section, Darren felt a subtle vibration through the deck plating. Astra, do you feel that? He asked, his voice low. She nodded, her eyes narrowing in concentration. Energy fluctuations. They're charging weapons. Darren tapped his comm unit. Bridge, this is Chen. We're detecting energy spikes consistent with weapon charging. Recommend evasive maneuvers to port. Understood, Mr. Chen, Lieutenant Mason's voice replied. Adjusting course now. Moments later, the ship shuddered as Vex's attack barely missed them. Darren and Astra braced themselves against the bulkhead, their enhanced reflexes keeping them steady. Suddenly, a new sensation washed over them, a feeling of impending danger that set their nerves on edge. Darren's eyes widened as he realized what it meant. They're launching boarding pods, he shouted into his comm. Multiple impact points imminent. The ship rocked as the first wave of pods struck the hull. Alarms blared, and the sounds of tearing metal echoed through the corridors. Darren and Astra shared a brief, intense look before springing into action. They moved with incredible speed and precision, their movements perfectly synchronized. As they rounded a corner, they encountered the first group of Bolian boarders cutting through an airlock. Without hesitation, Darren and Astra engaged the intruders. Their enhanced strength and reflexes made them formidable opponents. Darren dodged a blast from an energy weapon with impossible speed, closing the distance to disarm the Bolian soldier with a swift strike. Astra, her mind processing tactical information at an astonishing rate, anticipated the movements of two other boarders. She maneuvered between them, using their own momentum to send them crashing into each other. As they fought, Darren and Astra communicated without words, their newfound mental connection allowing them to coordinate their actions flawlessly. They moved as one, covering each other's blind spots and capitalizing on every opening. More boarding parties breached the ship, and security teams rushed to engage them. Darren and Astra found themselves at the heart of the defense, directing teams and providing crucial intelligence on the invaders' movements. Through the chaos of the battle, Darren caught a glimpse of a familiar face, Commander Vex himself leading a group of elite troops toward the ship's command center. The Bolian commander's eyes locked with Darren's for a brief moment, a look of surprise and drive crossing his features. Astra, Darren called out, gesturing toward Vex's group. We need to stop them before they reach the bridge. She nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As they prepared to pursue Vex and his team, Darren felt the weight of the pheromone weapon at his hip. He knew that using it would be a last resort, but with the fate of the ship and potentially interstellar peace hanging in the balance, he steeled himself for what might come. Together, Darren and Astra charged forward, their enhanced bodies and minds pushed to their limits as they raced to intercept Commander Vex before he could reach his objective. The corridors ahead echoed with the sounds of battle, the outcome of this confrontation still uncertain. Uncertain as Darren and Astra raced to intercept Commander Vex, their enhanced senses guided them through the chaos, allowing them to navigate the ship's corridors with uncanny precision. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with the first wave of Bolian soldiers emerging from a freshly cut breach in the hull. Without hesitation, Darren engaged the lead Bolian, his movements fluid and powerful. He ducked under a swinging energy weapon, using his newfound strength to disarm the soldier with a swift strike to the wrist. Astra's eyes darted across the Bolian squad, her enhanced mind rapidly analyzing their weaponry and defensive systems. Darren, their plasma rifles have a vulnerable power coupling on the left side, she called out, her voice calm despite the intensity of the moment. Darren nodded, seamlessly incorporating the information into his fighting style. He targeted the weak points Astra identified, rendering the Bolian weapons useless with precise strikes. As more invaders poured through the breach, Darren and Astra moved in perfect synchronization. Their enhanced bond allowed them to anticipate each other's actions, creating an impenetrable defense. Darren's combat prowess, combined with Astra's tactical insights, made them a formidable team. Security Team Alpha, flank from the right, Astra communicated through her comm unit, directing the Earth vessel's defenders. Their armor is weakest at the joints. The ship's security forces responded swiftly, following Astra's guidance to neutralize the Bolian threat efficiently. Darren and Astra's efforts minimized casualties on both sides, incapacitating rather than killing whenever possible. Amidst the fray, Admiral Frost's voice crackled through their comm units. Darren, Astra, we've detected Commander Vex on board. He's heading towards the data core. Intercept him immediately. Understood, Admiral, Darren replied, exchanging a quick glance with Astra. As they made their way through the ship, Darren noticed a change in his perception. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds sharper. He glanced at Astra and saw her indigo skin shimmering with an otherworldly glow. Astra, are you feeling different? He asked, his voice low. She nodded, her eyes wide. The mixed blood, it's affecting us more intensely than before. A wave of pleasure washed over Darren, nearly causing him to stumble. He steadied himself against a bulkhead, his breath coming in short gasps. Dr. Vaughn's concerned voice came through their comms. Your biochemical readings are off the charts. The prolonged exposure to the mixed blood is causing unexpected side effects. Be cautious. Continued exertion could lead to a dangerous overload. Despite the growing distraction, Darren and Astra pressed on, their sense of duty overriding the intense sensations coursing through their bodies. They tracked Vex through the ship, their enhanced senses allowing them to pick up subtle traces of his passage. As they approached the data core, Darren's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of rapid typing. They entered the room to find Vex hunched over a terminal, his fingers flying across the keypad as he attempted to download the classified research. Vex spun to face them, his eyes narrowing as he took in their altered appearance. So, the rumors are true, he said, his voice a low growl. You've become something more. Darren stepped forward, his stance ready but non-threatening. Commander Vex, stand down. This doesn't have to end in violence. Vex's hand moved to his belt, revealing a small device. I'm afraid it's not that simple, he said, his tone cold. This is a dead man's switch linked to explosives on my ship. Any attempt to capture me, and both our vessels will be destroyed. Astra's mind raced, analyzing potential solutions. Her eyes fell on the pheromone weapon at Darren's hip, and a plan formed in her mind. She caught Darren's gaze, a silent message passing between them. In one fluid motion, Darren activated the pheromone dispersal system. A fine mist filled the air of the data core, its effect on Vex immediate and overwhelming. The Bolian commander's eyes widened, his body trembling as waves of pleasure crashed over him. The dead man's switch slipped from his fingers as he fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the compound's potency. Darren quickly secured the device, neutralizing the threat of explosion. But as the pheromone cloud enveloped them, he felt his own control slipping. The biochemical reaction between human and Bolian physiology intensified, creating a strange connection between the three of them. Vex looked up at them, his expression a mix of confusion and wonder. What is happening to us? He gasped, the hostility in his voice replaced by a strange sense of kinship. Before Darren or Astra could respond, Admiral Frost's voice cut through the haze. Data core sealed and quarantined. Dr. Vaughn, prepare for immediate examination of all three individuals. As the pheromone's effects began to subside, Darren and Astra helped Vex to his feet. The three of them stood in silence, each grappling with the implications of what had just occurred. The Earth vessel resumed its course, now carrying not only its original crew, but also the captured Commander Vex. As they made their way to the medical bay for examination, Darren couldn't shake the feeling that this incident in the data core had changed everything. The complex interplay of biology, politics, and personal relationships had taken yet another unexpected turn, and the consequences of their actions were only beginning to unfold. As they approached the medical bay, Darren felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. He stumbled, catching himself against the corridor wall. "Darren!" Astra exclaimed, reaching out to steady him. Her touch sent a jolt of electricity through his body, intensifying the strange sensations he was experiencing. Commander Vex, still groggy from the pheromone exposure, looked at them with a mixture of confusion and concern. "What's happening to us?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. Before either Darren or Astra could respond, the medical bay doors slid open, revealing Dr. Elena Vaughn and her team. They were dressed in protective suits, their faces obscured by transparent visors. "Inside, quickly," Dr. Vaughn ordered, her voice firm but tinged with urgency. As soon as they entered, the doors sealed behind them with a hiss. The medical bay had been transformed into a quarantine zone, with sophisticated equipment lining the walls and a series of isolation chambers set up in the center. "Strip down and enter the decontamination showers, Ray," Dr. Vaughn instructed, pointing to a series of alcoves. "We need to begin testing immediately." Darren, Astra, and Vex complied, each stepping into a separate shower unit. As the decontamination mist enveloped him, Darren felt his skin tingle, every nerve ending seemingly on fire. He caught a glimpse of Astra in the adjacent unit, her indigo skin glistening with moisture. Their eyes met, and he felt a surge of emotion that wasn't entirely his own. After the decontamination process, they were each directed to a separate examination table. Dr. Vaughn approached Darren, a handheld scanner in her gloved hands. "How are you feeling, Mr. Chen?" she asked, running the device over his body. Darren struggled to find the words. "Everything's intense. Colors, sounds, sensations. And I can feel them." He nodded towards Astra and Vex. Dr. Vaughn's eyes widened behind her visor. She moved quickly between the three patients, her team working in synchronized efficiency as they collected blood samples, tissue biopsies, and neural scans. Hours passed in a blur of tests and examinations. Darren drifted in and out of consciousness, his enhanced senses overwhelmed by the constant stimuli. Each time he awoke, he felt a pull towards Astra and Vex, as if an invisible tether connected them. Finally, Dr. Vaughn approached them, her expression a mixture of awe and concern. "We've completed our initial analysis," she said, her voice grave. "The pheromone compound has triggered significant genetic alterations in all three of you. Your DNA is showing signs of a unique hybrid structure, combining human and Bolian traits." Vex sat up abruptly, his eyes wide. "That's impossible," he protested. "I'm afraid it's very real, Commander," Dr. Vaughn replied. "What's more, the compound seems to have created a symbiotic bond between the three of you. Your brainwave patterns are synchronizing, and you're exhibiting heightened empathic abilities." As if to underscore her point, Darren felt a surge of fear and disbelief that he instinctively knew belonged to Vex. He turned to the Bolian commander, their eyes meeting in shared understanding. Astra's voice was barely above a whisper. What does this mean for us? Before Dr. Vaughn could answer, Admiral Frost's voice came through the communication system. Dr. Vaughn, report. The doctor moved to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. A holographic image of Admiral Frost appeared, her face etched with concern. Admiral, the situation is unprecedented, Dr. Vaughn began. She quickly summarized their findings, her words painting a picture of a biological transformation that defied conventional understanding. Admiral Frost's expression grew increasingly grave as she listened. When Dr. Vaughn finished, she took a deep breath before speaking. Doctor, I'm ordering the medical bay sealed off from the rest of the ship. No one goes in or out without my direct authorization. We need to contain this situation until we understand the full implications. Understood, Admiral, Dr. Vaughn replied. As the hologram flickered out, Darren felt a wave of claustrophobia wash over him. He wasn't sure if it was his own emotion or one shared by Astra or Vex. The medical bay, expansive as it was, suddenly felt confining. Dr. Vaughn turned back to her patients, her expression softening. We're going to continue our tests, but I want you to rest now. Your bodies are undergoing significant changes, and you need to conserve your energy. As Darren lay back on his examination table, he felt an irresistible pull towards Astra and Vex. Without conscious thought, they moved their tables closer together, forming a triangle. The moment they were within arm's reach, a sense of calm washed over them. Darren reached out, his fingers intertwining with Astra's. His other hand found Vex's, completing the circuit. As their skin made contact, Darren gasped. Images and emotions flooded his mind. Astra's childhood on a distant Bolian colony, Vex's years of military training, snippets of memories that weren't his own. Dr. Vaughn watched in fascination, her scanner beeping rapidly as it recorded the spike in neural activity. Extraordinary, she murmured. As Darren drifted off to sleep, still connected to Astra and Vex, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. The boundaries between them, human, Bolian, friend, enemy, were blurring, replaced by something new and undefined. Outside the sealed medical bay, the Earth vessel continued its journey home, carrying within it a secret that would reshape the future of interspecies relations. And as the ship's long-range sensors detected the approach of unknown vessels, the true test of Darren, Astra, and Vex's newfound bond was about to begin. As the ship's sensors picked up the approaching vessels, a tense atmosphere permeated the bridge. Admiral Frost leaned forward in her command chair, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Report," she ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Lieutenant Commander Reza, the ship's tactical officer, responded promptly. 7 ships on an intercept course, Admiral. Configuration suggests a mixed fleet. Andorian, Tellurite, and Orion vessels. The Admiral's brow furrowed. "Open a channel." As the communication officer complied, the main view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of an Andorian captain. His antennae twitched with hardly restrained agitation as he spoke. "Earth vessel, this is Captain Thren of the Andorian Imperial Guard. We demand the immediate surrender of your human-Bolian hybrid research and the test subjects. This technology poses a threat to the balance of power in the quadrant and must be contained." Admiral Frost's expression remained impassive, but her mind raced. She cut the transmission and turned to her senior staff. "Options?" Dr. Vaughn, who had been summoned to the bridge, stepped forward. "Admiral, I believe our best chance lies with Darren, Astra, and Vex. Their enhanced abilities could provide us with an unprecedented advantage." The Admiral nodded, her decision made. "Bring them to the bridge. Prepare a secure chamber for them to work in." As the medical team rushed to comply, the bridge crew worked feverishly to fortify their defenses. The alien coalition's ships loomed ever closer on the display, their weapons charged and ready. Within minutes, Darren, Astra, and Vex were escorted onto the bridge. Despite their weakened state, willpower shone in their eyes. They were quickly briefed on the situation and led to a specially prepared chamber adjacent to the main bridge area. As they settled into their positions, forming a triangle as they had in the medical bay, Dr. Vaughn activated a series of monitoring devices. "Remember," she cautioned, "your bodies are under immense strain. We'll be monitoring you closely." The trio nodded in unison, their hands instinctively reaching for each other. As their fingers intertwined, a visible wave of energy seemed to pass between them. Their eyes closed and their breathing synchronized. On the bridge, Admiral Frost watched as data began to flood the tactical displays. "Incredible," Lieutenant Commander Reza muttered, his fingers flying over his console. "They're processing tactical data faster than our most advanced computers." "Open a channel to the Coalition fleet," Darren's voice came through the comm system, steady and clear, despite the strain evident on his face. As the channel opened, Darren began to speak, his words carrying the weight of 3 minds working in perfect harmony. He outlined a vision of cooperation, his diplomatic skills enhanced by Astra's scientific knowledge and Vex's tactical expertise. "We stand at a crossroads," Darren's voice resonated across the communication channels. "The research you seek to contain holds the potential for medical breakthroughs that could benefit all our species. We propose a joint initiative, a collaboration that could usher in a new era of interspecies cooperation." As Darren spoke, Astra's voice seamlessly took over, delving into the scientific implications of their research. Her words painted a vivid picture of the medical advancements possible, from curing genetic diseases to extending lifespans across multiple species. Vex's tactical acumen came into play as he addressed the security concerns of the Coalition. He proposed a series of safeguards and checks that would ensure the research couldn't be weaponized or used to destabilize the current balance of power. On the bridge, Admiral Frost watched as the alien ships' formations began to shift. Some vessels, particularly the Andorian ships, moved out of attack positions. However, a group of Orion ships maintained their aggressive stance. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Reza reported, "we're detecting power buildups in the Orion ships' weapon systems." Before Frost could respond, Darren's voice cut through the tension. "We've detected a hidden agenda within the Coalition. Some factions intend to steal the research for their own purposes." This revelation sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. Several ships broke formation, their captains demanding explanations from their allies. Seizing the moment of confusion, Admiral Frost ordered a series of evasive maneuvers, positioning their ship at a tactical advantage. Simultaneously, she received a signal from Dr. Vaughn. "Admiral," the doctor's voice was urgent, "their vital signs are critical. We need to end this now." Frost nodded grimly. "Darren, Astra, Vex, it's time. Give it everything you've got." In the chamber, the trio's grip on each other tightened. Their bodies began to glow with an otherworldly light as they channeled their combined energy. A pulse of empathic energy burst forth, amplified by the ship's communication array and washing over the alien fleet. The effect was immediate and profound. On the interface, Frost watched as crew members on the alien ship staggered, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of emotions and shared understanding. The Orion ships, caught in the epicenter of the pulse, veered wildly off course before retreating at maximum warp. As the pulse faded, a new message came through. It was the Andorian captain, his antennae now drooping with a mix of exhaustion and newfound respect. "Earth vessel, we request a diplomatic summit. There is much we need to discuss." Admiral Frost allowed herself a small smile of relief. "Agreed, Captain. We'll transmit coordinates for a neutral meeting point shortly." As she turned to congratulate the trio, alarms blared from the medical monitors. Darren, Astra, and Vex lay motionless, their bodies racked with violent tremors. "Medical team to the bridge now!" Dr. Vaughn shouted, rushing to their side. As the medical staff swarmed around the unconscious trio, Frost felt the weight of command settle heavily on her shoulders. They had averted one crisis, but at what cost? The Earth vessel continued its journey toward the solar system, its course now altered to accommodate the upcoming diplomatic summit. In the medical bay, machines beeped steadily, monitoring the unstable vital signs of Darren, Astra, and Vex. Their ordeal was not nearly finished, and the true test of their newfound abilities, and the price they might have to pay for them, was only just beginning. As the medical team rushed to stabilize Darren, Astra, and Vex, Dr. Elena Vaughn's eyes widened in astonishment. The monitors displayed a cascade of physiological changes, unlike anything she had ever seen before. Their brain activity spiked in perfect synchronization, creating intricate patterns that danced across the screens. "Admiral," Dr. Vaughn called out, her voice a mix of excitement and concern. "You need to see this." Admiral Helena Frost strode into the medical bay, her piercing gaze fixed on the unconscious trio. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" Dr. Vaughn's fingers flew across the holographic display, bringing up a series of complex molecular structures. "Their DNA is stabilizing, Admiral. The shared dream state they experienced during unconsciousness has triggered a new phase in their hybrid transformation." As if on cue, Darren's eyes fluttered open, followed almost immediately by Astra and Vex. They sat up in unison, their movements perfectly coordinated. A faint, sweet scent filled the air around them. "That smell," Admiral Frost noted, her nostrils flaring slightly. Dr. Vaughn nodded, already running an atmospheric analysis. "It's a new pheromone compound their bodies are producing. It seems to be the key to stabilizing their previously unstable DNA." Darren looked at his hands, flexing his fingers, as if seeing them for the first time. "We feel different," he said, his voice carrying undertones of Astra and Vex's voices. Admiral Frost's mind raced with the possibilities. "Doctor, what are the implications of this development?" "Based on these readings," Dr. Vaughn replied, gesturing to the screens, "their abilities have been enhanced further. The pheromone compound appears to be strengthening their empathic bond and augmenting their cognitive functions." The Admiral's expression hardened with perseverance. "Prepare them for limited participation in the upcoming diplomatic summit. Their unique perspective could be crucial in negotiating a peaceful resolution." Dr. Vaughn opened her mouth to protest, but was cut short by Vex's steady voice. "We're ready, Admiral. We understand the risks, but we also know the importance of this summit." As the Earth vessel approached the neutral space station on the outskirts of the solar system, tension permeated the ship. Security teams ran final checks, while diplomatic staff hurriedly reviewed protocols and briefing materials. Darren, Astra, and Vex were escorted to a specially prepared chamber adjacent to the main conference room. As they entered, they instinctively moved closer together, their bodies seeming to relax in proximity to one another. Dr. Vaughn followed them in, setting up monitoring equipment with practiced efficiency. "Remember, at the first sign of distress, we're pulling you out. No arguments." The trio nodded in unison, their eyes conveying a depth of understanding that went beyond words. As the diplomatic summit commenced, Admiral Frost took center stage, her voice clear and authoritative as she presented Earth's position. "The human-Bolian blood interaction research represents a unique opportunity for interspecies cooperation and medical advancement," she stated, her gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. However, the atmosphere quickly turned hostile as Captain Garak, the Orion representative, leaned forward aggressively. "You speak of cooperation, yet you withhold crucial information about the hybrid transformation? What are you hiding, Admiral?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathered representatives. Admiral Frost's eyebrows furrowed, recognizing the critical juncture they had reached. She tapped her communicator. "Bring them in," she ordered quietly. The door slid open, and Darren, Astra, and Vex entered the conference room. A hush fell over the assembly as the trio took their positions at the center of the room. The faint, sweet scent of their pheromones wafted through the air, subtly influencing the emotional state of those present. Darren stepped forward, his voice resonating with an uncanny harmony. "Honored delegates, we stand before you as living proof of the potential that lies in interspecies cooperation." As he spoke, Astra and Vex moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies emanating a soft, barely perceptible glow. Astra's voice seamlessly took over, delving into the scientific intricacies of their transformation, while Vex addressed the security implications with tactical precision. The delegates listened, transfixed. The trio's empathic abilities allowed them to sense the hidden fears and agendas in the room, addressing them with uncanny accuracy. "We understand your concerns about the balance of power," Vex said, his gaze locked on the Andorian delegation. "But consider the possibilities if we channel this research into medical advancements that could benefit all our species." As the discussion progressed, the trio's skin began to emit a more noticeable bioluminescent glow. Gasps of awe and alarm rippled through the conference room. Darren, drawing on the combined knowledge and intuition of the trio, proposed a bold plan. We suggest the formation of a galactic research consortium, a collaborative effort to study interspecies interactions and develop new medical treatments that could revolutionize healthcare across our worlds. The proposal sent a buzz of excitement through the room. Even the skeptical Tellarites leaned forward with interest. However, Captain Garak remained unmoved, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. As the negotiations intensified, the strain on Darren, Astra, and Vex became evident. Their bioluminescence flared brightly and beads of sweat formed on their brows. Dr. Vaughn, monitoring their vital signs, signaled urgently to Admiral Frost. The Admiral nodded grimly and stepped forward. Esteemed delegates, we must take a brief recess. Please consider the proposal put forth. We will reconvene shortly to continue our discussions. As the trio was escorted from the room, their glowing forms left a lasting impression on the assembled delegates. The conference room buzzed with excited and apprehensive chatter, the fate of interspecies relations hanging in the balance. In the medical bay, Dr. Vaughn and her team worked feverishly to stabilize the trio's condition. Monitors beeped urgently as their vital signs fluctuated wildly. Their transformation is accelerating, Dr. Vaughn reported, her voice tense. We're seeing physiological changes we can't even begin to understand. As they fought to save Darren, Astra, and Vex, the doctor couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something momentous. The next phase of their evolution could reshape the future of interspecies relations in ways no one could predict. Outside, the diplomatic summit continued, the delegates' minds still reeling from what they had witnessed. The potential for a new era of galactic cooperation hung in the air, tempered by the unknown consequences of the hybrid transformation unfolding in the medical bay. The potential for a new era of galactic cooperation hung in the air, tempered by the unknown consequences of the hybrid transformation unfolding in the medical bay. Inside the sterile chamber, Dr. Elena Vaughn's fingers flew across holographic displays, her eyes darting between the fluctuating vital signs of Darren, Astra, and Vex. The trio's bodies pulsed with an otherworldly glow, their skin emitting waves of soft, bioluminescent light that synchronized with their shared heartbeats. We're losing stability in their cellular structure, Dr. Vaughn called out, her voice taut with urgency. Increase the chronoton field by 15%. As her team scrambled to adjust the equipment, Admiral Helena Frost strode into the medical bay, her face a mask of concern. She halted abruptly, her eyes widening at the sight before her. Darren's once human form had transformed dramatically. Iridescent patterns, reminiscent of Boolean markings, now adorned his more defined musculature. Beside him, Astra's blue complexion had taken on a human-like tone, her hair growing at an astonishing rate. Vex, the former Boolean commander, now bore a striking blend of human and Boolean features, his once rigid facial structure softened into an alien beauty. Doctor, Admiral Frost said, her voice barely above a whisper, what's happening to them? Dr. Vaughn's eyes never left the monitors as she replied, their transformation is accelerating beyond our initial projections. Their brain activity has increased exponentially, suggesting enhanced cognitive abilities, but their bodies are struggling to keep up with the changes. A sudden alarm blared, cutting through the tense atmosphere. Dr. Vaughn's hands flew across the controls, her face pale with concern. Admiral, without intervention, we risk severe physiological stress or organ failure. Frost's face hardened. What are our options? Dr. Vaughn hesitated for a moment before responding. I propose we synthesize a stabilizing agent using a modified version of their own pheromone compound. It's risky, but it could halt the uncontrolled transformation and allow their bodies to adjust more gradually. The Admiral's eyes narrowed as she weighed the potential consequences. After a moment of deliberation, she nodded sharply. Do it. As Dr. Vaughn and her team rushed to prepare the stabilizing agent, the medical bay's sensors detected a sudden spike in brain activity. The trio's bioluminescent glow intensified, and above their semi-conscious forms, complex three-dimensional light patterns began to materialize. It's as if we're seeing a visual manifestation of their thoughts, Dr. Vaughn murmured, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her concern. With the synthesized compound prepared, Dr. Vaughn initiated the stabilization procedure. As the agent entered their bloodstream, the trio's vital signs began to level out. A collective sigh of relief swept through the medical bay. However, the respite was short-lived. The bioluminescent glow emanating from Darren, Astra, and Vex suddenly intensified, bathing the entire bay in pulsating light. The three-dimensional thought patterns above them coalesced into a single, intricate structure resembling a map of neural pathways. Alarms blared as the ship's sensors detected a massive energy surge. The hybrid trio's shared consciousness seemed to interface directly with the ship's computer systems, accessing and processing data at an unprecedented speed. "Containment field," Admiral Frost barked, her training kicking in. "Now!" As the energy vortex expanded, the trio's bodies lifted off their beds, suspended in midair. The swirling maelstrom of light and energy enveloped them, growing more intense by the second. Dr. Vaughn's eyes widened as she analyzed the incoming data. "Admiral, this is incredible. The energy field is creating a localized subspace phenomenon. It's like a miniature wormhole." The implications of this development weren't lost on Admiral Frost. The potential for revolutionary interstellar travel and communication methods suddenly seemed within reach. But at what cost? As if in response to her unspoken question, the energy vortex pulsed, sending a shock wave through the station. Lights flickered, and communication channels crackled with interference. Admiral Frost tapped her communicator. "Frost to bridge. Report." "Admiral," came the strained voice of her first officer. "The phenomenon is affecting station-wide systems. The delegates are demanding answers." Frost's mind raced. The diplomatic summit, the fate of interspecies relations, and now this unprecedented development, all hung in the balance. She turned to Dr. Vaughn, her voice filled with steely dedication. "Doctor, I need options. How do we stabilize this situation?" As Dr. Vaughn opened her mouth to respond, the energy vortex pulsed again, more powerfully this time. The containment field flickered, struggling to hold back the surging power. In the center of the maelstrom, Darren, Astra, and Vex remained suspended, their bodies now barely visible within the swirling light. Admiral Frost knew she had to act quickly. The fate of the hybrid trio, the summit, and potentially the entire sector now rested on her next decision. With the energy vortex growing more unstable by the second, she prepared to make a choice that would shape the future of human-alien relations and redefine the boundaries of space exploration. As Admiral Frost prepared to make her decision, the energy vortex surrounding Darren, Astra, and Vex pulsed one final time before collapsing in on itself. The sudden implosion sent a shock wave through the medical bay, knocking equipment to the floor and momentarily disorienting the staff. When the dust settled, Dr. Vaughn rushed to the trio's side. They lay motionless on their beds, the eerie glow that had enveloped them now gone. The doctor's hands moved swiftly, checking vital signs and assessing their condition. "Admiral," she called out, her voice tinged with a mix of relief and amazement. "They're stable, unconscious, but stable." Admiral Frost approached cautiously, her eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. Darren, Astra, and Vex had undergone a startling transformation. Their bodies now exhibited a perfect blend of human and Boolean characteristics. Skin a harmonious mix of human tones and Boolean blue, with subtle iridescent patterns coursing beneath the surface. "Doctor, what exactly are we looking at here?" Frost asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Vaughn shook her head, still processing the data flooding her medical tricorder. "It appears their hybrid physiology has reached a state of equilibrium. I've never seen anything like it." As the medical team worked to stabilize the environment, Admiral Frost ordered a full examination of the trio. Hours passed as Dr. Vaughn and her team conducted a battery of tests, their findings growing more extraordinary with each passing moment. "Admiral, you need to see this," Dr. Vaughn said, gesturing to a holographic display of the trio's cellular structure. "Their strength and stamina have increased exponentially. Cognitive functions are off the charts. But the most intriguing development is this. She zoomed in on a molecular structure, rotating it for emphasis. Their bodies are now producing a stable version of the pheromone compound that initially caused the Boolean addiction to human blood. It's perfectly balanced, with none of the addictive properties we saw before. Admiral Frost's mind raced with the implications. This development could be the key to resolving the diplomatic crisis and ushering in a new era of interspecies cooperation. She made a swift decision. "Prepare them for transport," she ordered. "As soon as they're conscious, we're bringing them to the summit." As if on cue, Darren began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence. Astra and Vex followed suit, their synchronized movements a testament to their deepened connection. Darren sat up, his gaze meeting Admiral Frost's. When he spoke, his voice carried a new resonance. "Admiral, He paused, seemingly confused by his own words. Astra reached out, placing a hand on Darren's arm. The moment they touched, a spark of understanding passed between them. Vex joined them, completing the circuit. "We can hear each other's thoughts," Vex explained, his voice a perfect blend of his former Boolean timbre and a new harmonious quality. "Our minds are linked in ways we never imagined possible." Admiral Frost nodded, taking this new development in stride. "Can you stand? We need you at the summit. Your transformation may be the key to brokering peace." The trio rose in unison, their movements fluid and graceful. As they followed Admiral Frost out of the medical bay, Dr. Vaughn called out, "I'm coming with you. We don't know how long this stability will last." The journey to the summit chamber was surreal. Crew members stopped in their tracks, staring in awe at the transformed trio. Darren, Astra, and Vex moved as one, their steps perfectly synchronized, their presence exuding a calm that seemed to affect everyone around them. As they approached the summit chamber, Admiral Frost turned to address them. "We're walking into a powder keg. The delegates are on edge, and your disappearance has only heightened tensions. Are you ready for this?" The trio exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them in an instant. Darren spoke for them all. "We're ready, Admiral. Our unique perspective might be exactly what's needed to bridge the divide." The doors to the summit chamber slid open, and a hush fell over the assembled delegates. All eyes turned to the entrance as Admiral Frost stepped in, followed by the transformed trio. Gasps of shock and murmurs of disbelief rippled through the room. Captain Garak, the Orion representative who had been so confrontational earlier, stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "What manner of trickery is this?" he demanded, his voice a mix of anger and poorly concealed fear. Admiral Frost raised a hand, calling for silence. "Esteemed delegates, I present to you the result of our research into human Boolean blood interactions. What you see before you is not trickery, but a remarkable evolution in interspecies biology." Darren stepped forward, his presence immediately commanding attention. As he began to speak, Astra and Vex's knowledge flowed through him, their shared consciousness allowing him to address the concerns of each species with uncanny precision. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice resonating with newfound authority, "we stand before you as living proof of the untapped potential that lies in cooperation between our species. Our transformation has granted us insights that could revolutionize medicine, diplomacy, and interstellar relations." As Darren spoke, a subtle shift began to occur in the room. The initial shock and fear gave way to curiosity and, in some cases, cautious optimism. The trio's pheromones, now stable and non-addictive, worked to create an atmosphere of openness and empathy. Astra took over seamlessly, her scientific expertise shining through as she explained the intricacies of their hybrid physiology. The stable pheromone compound our bodies now produce could be the foundation for new medical treatments, benefiting not just humans and Booleans, but potentially all species represented here. Vex followed, his strategic mind offering insights into the security implications of their research. "By working together, we can ensure that these advancements are used responsibly, enhancing the safety and well-being of all our worlds." As the trio's presentation continued, even the most skeptical delegates found themselves leaning in, captivated by the potential they represented. Captain Garak, who had been their most vocal opponent, now sat in thoughtful silence, his earlier hostility replaced by intense curiosity. Sensing the shift in the room, Admiral Frost seized the moment. She stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. In light of these developments, I propose the formation of an intergalactic research coalition. This organization would bring together the brightest minds from all our worlds to study and ethically apply the knowledge gained from this extraordinary event. The proposal sent a ripple of excitement through the chamber. Delegates began to nod in agreement, many already turning to their neighbors to discuss the possibilities. The atmosphere of tension that had dominated the summit was giving way to one of cautious hope and collaboration. However, not everyone was swayed by the trio's presentation. A group of Bolian representatives, led by a stern-faced counselor, huddled together, their expressions a mix of concern and disapproval. Their whispered conversations grew more heated as the general mood of the summit shifted towards acceptance of the hybrid trio. As the excitement in the chamber grew, a sudden alert cut through the air. The space station's long-range sensors had detected something approaching, something that would add yet another layer of complexity to the already delicate situation. Admiral Frost's communicator chirped urgently. She stepped aside to receive the report, her face growing grave as she listened. The summit's atmosphere of budding cooperation was about to face its first real test, as an unknown variable entered the equation. The hybrid trio, sensing the shift in Admiral Frost's demeanor, exchanged glances. Their newfound abilities had brought them this far, but would they be enough to navigate the challenges that lay ahead? As the summit teetered on the brink of a new era of cooperation, the unknown loomed on the horizon, promising to push the boundaries of their transformed existence even further. As Admiral Frost turned back to address the summit, her communicator chirped again, this time with an urgent message from the bridge. "Admiral," the officer's voice crackled through, "long-range sensors have detected an unidentified fleet approaching our position. Their technology, it's unlike anything we've ever seen." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of voices, delegates demanding answers and assurances. Admiral Frost raised her hand, calling for silence. "Esteemed representatives, I assure you we are taking all necessary precautions. However, this development presents an unprecedented opportunity for our newly formed coalition." She turned to Darren, Astra, and Vex, her eyes glinting with drive. "Your unique abilities may be the key to establishing peaceful first contact. Are you willing to lead a diplomatic mission to meet this unknown species?" The trio exchanged glances, their shared consciousness allowing for an instant, wordless decision. Darren stepped forward, speaking for all three. "We're ready, Admiral. Our combined knowledge and abilities give us the best chance of success." Admiral Frost nodded, her expression a mix of pride and concern. "Prepare for immediate departure. We'll equip you with our most advanced shuttle, modified to enhance your abilities." As the summit chamber buzzed with activity, the trio was escorted to a nearby hangar. There they found a sleek, silver shuttle unlike any they had seen before. Its hull gleamed with an iridescent sheen, reminiscent of their own transformed skin. Dr. Vaughn met them at the shuttle's entrance, her face etched with worry. "I've outfitted the shuttle with a specialized chamber designed to amplify your empathic abilities," she explained, leading them inside. "But be cautious. We don't fully understand the extent of your new physiology." As they entered the shuttle, the trio felt an immediate change. The air seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. Their awareness of each other intensified, thoughts and emotions flowing between them with startling clarity. Darren's hand brushed against Astra's arm, sending a jolt of electricity through both of them. Vex stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible pull. The confined space of the shuttle seemed to magnify their connection, their bodies humming with a new, powerful energy. "This is unexpected," Astra whispered, her voice husky. The others nodded, equally affected by the sudden surge of attraction and heightened empathy. As the shuttle's crew boarded, the effect of the trio's intensified pheromones became immediately apparent. The human and alien personnel moved with increased efficiency, their usual barriers of suspicion and miscommunication melting away. Captain Lauren, the shuttle's commander, approached the trio with a look of awe. "I've never felt so Clear-headed, she admitted. Whatever you three are doing, it's incredible. Darren nodded, his mind racing with the implications. Our pheromones seem to be promoting trust and cooperation. This could be invaluable for the first contact. As the shuttle launched, streaking away from the station towards the unknown fleet, the trio immersed themselves in preparation. Their enhanced cognitive abilities allowed them to process vast amounts of data on first contact protocols, alien psychology, and diplomatic strategies. Hours passed in a blur of shared consciousness and intense focus. The trio barely noticed the passage of time until Captain Loren's voice cut through their concentration. We're approaching the alien fleet, she announced, her voice tight with tension. You need to see this. The trio moved to the forward viewport, their breath catching at the sight before them. Massive crystalline structures hung in space, dwarfing even the largest ships in Earth's fleet. The alien vessels seemed to bend the very fabric of space around them, distorting the starfield behind them. It's beautiful, Astra breathed, her scientific mind already racing with questions about the technology on display. Vex nodded, his strategic insight kicking in. And potentially centuries beyond our own capabilities. We must approach with caution. Darren stepped forward, placing his hands on the shuttle's control panel. He closed his eyes, drawing on the combined knowledge and abilities of the trio. When he spoke, his voice carried an otherworldly resonance. This is Darren of the United Earth Alliance, representing a coalition of peaceful species. We come seeking friendship and mutual understanding. As Darren's message was broadcast, Astra and Vex joined him, linking their minds to project a powerful empathic signal. The shuttle's specialized chamber hummed to life, amplifying their abilities. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the shuttle was enveloped in a shimmering energy field. The crew gasped as they felt themselves being drawn toward the largest of the crystalline ships. Remain calm, Vex advised, his voice steady despite the extraordinary situation. They're likely bringing us in for closer examination. As the shuttle was pulled into a cavernous docking bay, the trio felt a subtle shift in the air. The very atoms around them seemed to vibrate with an alien energy. The shuttle's hatch opened with a hiss, revealing a shimmering corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity. Darren, Astra, and Vex stepped forward, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. As they crossed the threshold, their surroundings blurred and shifted. They felt their physical forms begin to phase in and out of normal space-time, their senses expanding beyond anything they had ever experienced. In this altered state, they became aware of a presence, vast, ancient, and undeniably alien. Images and sensations flooded their minds, conveying concepts too complex for words. We are the Exarlac, came the telepathic message. Your transformation called to us across the stars. Show us what you have become. The trio's shared consciousness reached out, offering their memories, their knowledge, their very essence to the alien minds that surrounded them. As the exchange deepened, they began to understand the true nature of their encounter and the monumental decision that lay before them. Meanwhile, back on the space station, Admiral Frost watched the long-range sensors with growing unease. The alien fleet remained motionless, the modified shuttle now nothing more than a tiny blip on the massive display. Any word from the first contact team, she asked, her voice taut with tension. Nothing yet, Admiral, her communications officer replied, but we're detecting some unusual energy readings from the alien ships. Whatever's happening in there, it's big. As if on cue, a commotion erupted behind her. She turned to see Counselor Zorn storming towards her, his face contorted with rage. Admiral, you've gone too far this time, he snarled. Sending those abominations to represent us? You've doomed us all. Before Frost could respond, Captain Garak stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Perhaps, he said smoothly, it's time we considered alternative approaches to this situation. Admiral Frost's eyes narrowed as she realized the delicate balance she had struck was now teetering on the brink of collapse. With the fate of multiple civilizations hanging in the balance, she knew her next decision could change the course of history. As tensions mounted on the station, the hybrid trio found themselves at the center of a cosmic crossroads. their unique abilities and connection about to be tested in ways they could never have imagined. As the telepathic exchange with the XRLAC deepened, Darren, Astra, and Vex felt their bodies react in unexpected ways. A soft, pulsating glow emanated from their skin, visible even through their environmental suits. The XRLAC's collective consciousness radiated curiosity. "We detect a change in your physiology. May we examine further?" The trio exchanged quick glances, their shared mind weighing the implications. Astra nodded, her scientific curiosity overriding any hesitation. "We consent," Darren spoke for. A beam of shimmering energy enveloped them, tingling as it passed through their bodies. The XRLAC's voice reverberated in their minds. "Fascinating. Your hybrid DNA possesses remarkable adaptive capabilities. It can incorporate beneficial traits from other species." Vex's strategic mind raced with possibilities. "This could revolutionize interspecies relations," he said, his voice low with awe. "We propose an experiment," the XRLAC continued. "We offer a fraction of our genetic material. It may provide a solution to our species' stagnation." The trio's shared consciousness churned with conflicting emotions. Excitement at the scientific potential, warred with concern over the unknown risks. "We need time to consider," Astra said, her voice steady despite the weight of the decision. As they deliberated, their empathic abilities sensed a growing urgency from the XRLAC. Beneath the alien's calm exterior lay a current of desperation. Darren probed gently. "Your situation, it's more dire than you've let on, isn't it?" Images flooded their minds. XRLAC children born with devastating genetic defects, entire generations lost to a creeping cellular decay. "Our civilization teeters on the brink of collapse," the XRLAC admitted. "Your adaptability may be our last hope." The gravity of the situation settled over the trio. They huddled close, their skin brushing and sending sparks of sensation through their heightened nervous systems. "We can't ignore their plight," Astra whispered, her eyes shining with empathy and a hint of something more. Vex nodded, his tactical mind already formulating potential outcomes. "But we must consider the broader implications. This could change everything." Darren's hand found Astra's, their fingers intertwining. "We need to inform Admiral Frost. This decision affects more than just us." They turned to the XRLAC, their stance unified. "We need to contact our people. Can you establish a secure channel to our station?" The air shimmered, and a holographic interface materialized before them. Darren's fingers flew over the controls, composing an encrypted message detailing their situation. Aboard the space station, alarms blared as the transmission came through. Admiral Frost's eyes widened as she absorbed the information. Without hesitation, she called an emergency meeting of key representatives. The conference room crackled with tension as Frost relayed the trio's message. Counselor Zorn leapt to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Absolutely not. We cannot allow further corruption of our genetic heritage." Captain Garak leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. "On the contrary, we must ensure all species have equal access to any potential enhancements. The strategic advantages could be immense." As the debate raged, the hybrid trio made their decision. They turned to the XRLAC, their dedication strengthened by their deepening bond. "We agree to a limited genetic exchange," Darren announced. "We hope to gain insights that could benefit all our peoples." The XRLAC's gratitude washed over them in waves of emotion. Prepare yourselves. The process may be intense. Crystal-like structures emerged from the walls, surrounding the trio. Energy crackled between the crystals, bathing them in a scintillating light. They felt a tingling sensation as carefully selected XRLAC genetic sequences merged with their own. The transformation was swift and profound. Their skin took on a crystalline sheen, reflecting light in mesmerizing patterns. Neural pathways reconfigured, granting them a dizzying awareness of the space-time fabric around them. As their bodies changed, their mental link intensified. Memories and sensations flowed freely between them, individual identities blurring at the edges. The physical attraction they had felt before now deepened into an all-encompassing connection. The XRLAC watched in amazement as the trio successfully integrated their genetic material. Your adaptation exceeds our wildest expectations. This could be the key to universal genetic compatibility. Astra gasped as a new presence touched their shared consciousness. The essence of a XRLAC elder, the genetic donor. The aliens' vast knowledge and experience intertwined with their own, adding yet another layer to their unique bond. As the initial phase of integration completed, the trio became aware of a shift in the XRLAC's demeanor. We propose expanding this experiment to include willing volunteers from other species. The implications of this request sent shockwaves through their shared mind. They knew that their return to the space station would spark a firestorm of reactions, wonder, fear, and likely no small amount of suspicion. We need to proceed cautiously, Vex said, his strategic mind already mapping out potential scenarios. The balance of power between species could shift dramatically. Darren nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders. We carry within us the potential to revolutionize interspecies relations. We must use this gift wisely. As they prepared to board their shuttle for the return journey, Astra's hand found Darren's. The simple touch sent cascades of shared sensation through their enhanced nervous systems. Whatever challenges we face, she said softly, we face them together. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the star-studded expanse of space. As they stepped aboard, the trio knew that their evolving relationship and shared experiences had become central to their mission's success. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, carrying them back toward the space station and the uncertain future that awaited them. Their transformed bodies and expanded abilities would be met with a mix of wonder and fear. The fate of multiple civilizations hung in the balance, dependent on how they navigated the physical and diplomatic challenges ahead. As the shuttle streaked through space, Darren, Astra, and Vex sat in silent communion, their shared consciousness buzzing with possibilities and potential pitfalls. The essence of the XRLAC elder whispered ancient wisdom in the recesses of their minds, adding depth to their contemplations. The space station loomed before them, a gleaming bastion of interstellar cooperation. Yet they knew that beneath its shining exterior, conflicts and alliances were already forming around the implications of their transformation. Their return would spark a new phase in galactic relations, one that would test the limits of their newfound abilities and the strength of their unique bond. Their return would spark a new phase in galactic relations, one that would test the limits of their newfound abilities and the strength of their unique connection. As the shuttle approached the space station, an unexpected surge of energy coursed through the trio. Their newly acquired XRLAC abilities began to manifest, catching them off guard. Darren felt a strange tingling sensation in his fingertips, and before he could voice his concern, the shuttle began to flicker in and out of normal space. "What's happening?" Astra exclaimed, her eyes wide as she watched the station alternately appear and disappear before them. Vex gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles turning white. "We're phasing in and out of normal space-time. I can't stabilize our position." The shuttle's erratic behavior didn't go unnoticed by the station. Alarms blared as the automatic defense systems detected the anomaly. Warning shots streaked past the shuttle, illuminating the void around them. Inside the station's command center, Admiral Frost's eyes narrowed as she watched the scene unfold on the main display. "Hold your fire," she barked into the comm system. "That's our shuttle. Something's wrong with it, but it's not a threat." She turned to her security chief. "Assemble a team and meet me in the docking bay, and get medical down there too. We don't know what condition they'll be in when they land." As Frost raced toward the docking bay, the hybrid trio struggled to regain control of their shuttle. Darren closed his eyes, reaching out with his mind to the others. Their shared consciousness buzzed with a mixture of panic and willpower. "Focus," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We need to synchronize our thoughts. Maybe if we work together, we can stabilize the ship." Astra and Vex nodded, their hands finding each other's. As their minds merged more fully, the shuttle's wild oscillations began to slow. The fabric of space-time around them smoothed out, allowing them to approach the docking bay. With a final lurch, the shuttle settled into its berth. The docking clamps engaged with a resounding thunk, securing the vessel in place. For a moment, all was still. Then, with a hiss of equalizing pressure, the shuttle's hatch began to open. Admiral Frost, flanked by security personnel and medical staff, watched with anxious anticipation as the interior of the shuttle was revealed. Darren was the first to step out, his crystalline skin catching the light and sending prismatic reflections dancing across the docking bay. Astra and Vex followed close behind, their transformed appearances equally striking. A collective gasp rose from the assembled crowd. Some stepped back instinctively, while others leaned forward, curiosity overriding their caution. The trio's enhanced empathic abilities immediately picked up on the swirling emotions in the room. Fear, awe, confusion, and 100 other feelings crashed over them like a tidal wave. The sensory overload was overwhelming. Without conscious thought, they created a localized field of altered space-time around themselves, a protective bubble against the onslaught of emotions. The air around them shimmered and warped, creating a visible barrier between them and the rest of the station. Dr. Elena Vaughn, leading the medical team, approached cautiously. Her handheld scanner beeped rapidly as she took readings of the energy field and the altered physiology of the trio within. "Admiral," she called out, her voice tense, "I'm detecting significant changes in their genetic structure. There are elements here that don't match any known species in our database. We need to get them into quarantine immediately for a full examination." Frost nodded, her face grim. "Understood, Doctor. But let's remember, these are our people, not specimens. Treat them with respect." As Dr. Vaughn began setting up a mobile medical unit, news of the trio's return spread through the station like wildfire. In his quarters, Counselor Zorn received the report with a mixture of anger and vindication. "I warned them," he muttered, reaching for his comm unit. "This hybrid experiment has gone too far. It's time to put an end to this madness before it destroys us all." Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the station, Captain Grok was already making moves of his own. He sent encrypted messages to his contacts in the Orion Confederacy, outlining the potential advantages of the hybrid technology. Back in the docking bay, the trio struggled to maintain control of their abilities. The energy field around them fluctuated wildly, causing nearby objects to float momentarily before crashing back to the deck. "We need to stabilize this field," Vex said, his voice strained. "If we lose control completely, we could tear a hole in the station's hull." Darren nodded, reaching out to grasp Astra and Vex's hands. As their physical connection strengthened, so did their mental link. Slowly, the chaotic energy around them began to calm. Taking a deep breath, Darren turned to face Admiral Frost. "Admiral," he called out, his voice carrying easily despite the shimmering barrier between them. "We need to talk. What's happened to us? It's more important than any of us realized. The future of interspecies relations may depend on what we do next." Frost stepped forward, her expression a mixture of concern and perseverance. "I'm listening, Darren. But first, we need to make sure you're not a danger to yourselves or this station. Will you submit to a medical examination?" As the trio exchanged glances, their shared consciousness buzzing with unspoken communication, they knew that their next decision would set the course for everything that followed. The transformed state of their bodies, the power thrumming through their veins, and the deepening bond between them all hung in the balance as they prepared to face the consequences of their incredible journey. Transformation. The energy field surrounding them pulsed with an otherworldly glow, creating a barrier between the trio and the rest of the docking bay. Dr. Elena Vaughn approached cautiously, her handheld scanner beeping rapidly as she took readings. "Admiral," she called out, her voice tense, "I'm detecting significant changes in their genetic structure. We need to get them into quarantine immediately for a full examination." Admiral Frost nodded, her expression grim but determined. "Understood, Doctor. Let's move them to the secure medical bay." As the medical team prepared to transport the trio, the energy field surrounding them began to flicker and fade. Darren, Astra, and Vex felt a sudden shift in their bodies, as if the very atoms that compose them were rearranging themselves. "Something's happening," Astra gasped, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and apprehension. Before the eyes of the stunned onlookers, the trio's crystalline skin began to soften, taking on a more organic appearance while still retaining a subtle, otherworldly shimmer. The change rippled across their bodies like waves on a pond. Dr. Vaughn's scanner chirped urgently. "Their physiology is continuing to evolve," she announced, her eyes wide with fascination. "We need to move quickly." As the medical team guided the trio towards the exit, Darren, Astra, and Vex found their control over their newfound abilities increasing. The chaotic fluctuations in the space-time field around them settled into more localized gravitational disturbances. "I think we're stabilizing," Vex said, his voice steady as he focused on maintaining control. The group made their way through the corridors of the space station, drawing shocked gasps and curious stares from passing crew members. Admiral Frost walked alongside them, her presence a silent warning against any potential interference. Upon reaching the secure medical bay, Dr. Vaughn and her team immediately began a battery of tests. As they worked, the trio's connection to each other intensified. Waves of sensation and emotion flowed between them, their shared consciousness becoming a whirlpool of thoughts and feelings. Suddenly, Darren noticed the medical staff's behavior changing. Dr. Vaughn's movements became more fluid, her pupils dilating as she leaned in closer to take readings. The other staff members seemed similarly affected, their breathing quickening and cheeks flushing. "Doctor," Darren called out, his voice tinged with concern, "I think we might be having some kind of effect on you and your team." Dr. Vaughn blinked, shaking her head as if to clear it. She glanced at her own vital signs monitor and frowned. "You're right. Our heart rates are elevated. Hormone levels are spiking. You seem to be emitting some kind of potent pheromone." Admiral Frost, observing from behind a protective barrier, quickly assessed the situation. "Dr. Vaughn, pull your team back. We need to develop some kind of containment measure before we can proceed safely." As the medical staff retreated to a safe distance, Frost turned to her chief engineer. "I want specialized containment suits designed for each of them, something that can suppress these pheromone emissions and provide some control over their space-time manipulation abilities." While the engineering team worked on the containment suits, tension on the station continued to rise. News of the trio's return and transformation spread rapidly, sparking heated debates and growing unrest. On the main concourse, Counselor Zorn's voice boomed over the murmur of the crowd. "We cannot allow this dangerous experiment to continue. The mixing of species threatens the very fabric of our galactic society." His words found fertile ground among those already wary of the hybrid project. The crowd grew, their angry voices echoing through the station's corridors. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the station, Captain Garrock observed the unfolding chaos with calculating eyes. He saw an opportunity in the growing unrest and made his way to Admiral Frost's office. "Admiral," Garrock said smoothly as he entered, "I couldn't help but notice the precarious situation we find ourselves in. Perhaps I could offer the services of my Orion security forces to help maintain order." Frost's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "And what would you want in return, Captain?" Garrock's smile didn't waver. "Merely access to the hybrid trio's medical data. For purely scientific purposes, of course." Frost weighed her options, acutely aware of the ticking time bomb that was the station's population. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Limited access, under strict supervision. Don't make me regret this, Garrock." As Garrock's security forces began to deploy throughout the station, the engineering team arrived at the medical bay with the newly designed containment suits. The sleek, form-fitting garments hummed with integrated technology designed to dampen the trio's newfound abilities. Dr. Vaughn supervised as Darren, Astra, and Vex donned the suits. As the final seals clicked into place, the oppressive aura of pheromones dissipated, and the subtle gravitational distortions around them stabilized. "How do you feel?" Dr. Vaughn asked, approaching cautiously. Darren flexed his hands, testing the suit's responsiveness. "More in control, but muted somehow. It's like our connection has been dialed down." Astra nodded in agreement. "It's still there, but not as intense. Maybe that's for the best, for now." As the trio adjusted to their new containment measures, Admiral Frost's voice came over the station-wide communication system. "Attention all personnel and guests. I am convening an emergency meeting of the station's governing council to address the current situation. All representatives are to report to the main conference room immediately. The stage was set for a crucial debate that would shape the future of not only the station, but potentially the entire galactic community. As Darren, Astro, and Vex prepared to face the consequences of their transformation, they knew that the challenges ahead would test not only their new abilities, but also the strength of their unique bond. As the trio faced the prospect of the emergency council meeting, they couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity as the Interspecies Genetic Research Institute began its operations. Darren, Astra, and Vex found themselves at the center of intense scientific scrutiny, their unique hybrid physiology the subject of numerous experiments and tests. Dr. Elena Vaughn led the human contingent of researchers, working alongside Boolean and Exerlac scientists, to unravel the mysteries of the trio's genetic adaptability. The secure medical bay had been quickly transformed into a state-of-the-art research facility, filled with an array of advanced equipment and holographic displays. As Darren lay on an examination table, his skin tingling from the latest battery of tests, he couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. It reminded him of those first days after their initial transformation, but this time, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Fascinating," Dr. Vaughn murmured, her eyes fixed on a holographic display of Darren's cellular structure. "The rate of genetic recombination is unlike anything we've ever seen." Astra, observing from a nearby bio bed, felt a sudden surge of curiosity through their shared connection. "What exactly are you seeing, Doctor?" Before Dr. Vaughn could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the lab. Vex, who had been undergoing a separate series of tests, let out a surprised gasp as his skin began to shift and change. "What's happening?" Admiral Frost demanded, rushing into the lab with Captain Garak close behind. Dr. Vaughn's fingers flew over her console. "It appears to be some kind of rapid adaptation response. Vex's epidermal layers are changing to match the lab's environmental conditions." The assembled researchers watched in awe as Vex's skin took on a reflective quality, mirroring the sterile white of the lab walls. The chameleon-like transformation rippled across his body, leaving him looking like a living mirror. "Incredible," breathed an Andorian scientist, his antennae twitching with excitement. "The applications for survival in extreme environments are immense." Captain Garak's eyes gleamed with interest. He turned to Admiral Frost, speaking in a low, urgent tone. "Admiral, consider the possibilities. With this adaptive ability, we could create a new breed of space explorers capable of surviving on previously uninhabitable planets." Frost's brow furrowed. "The potential is clear, Captain, but we need to consider the ethical implications carefully. We're dealing with sentient beings, not equipment to be modified at will." As the discussion between Frost and Garak grew heated, Counselor Zorn burst into the lab, his face a mask of concern. "Admiral, we need to implement stronger security measures immediately. The station is buzzing with rumors, and I fear for the safety of both the research team and our subjects." Frost nodded grimly. "Agreed, Counselor. I've already authorized the installation of a specialized containment field developed by the Tellarite engineers. It can neutralize the trio's space-time manipulation abilities if necessary." As the political maneuvering continued around them, Darren, Astra, and Vex felt a sudden shift in their connection. The bond between them intensified, their bodies synchronizing on a cellular level. During a routine medical examination, this newfound synchronization led to an unexpected and intimate moment. As Dr. Vaughn checked Astra's vital signs, Darren and Vex simultaneously gasped, their bodies mirroring Astra's physiological responses. Dr. Vaughn stepped back, her cheeks flushing. I think we need to bring in some additional expertise to understand these developments." Admiral Frost, recognizing the potential diplomatic implications of the trio's deepening bond, quickly assigned a team of xenopsychologists led by Dr. Thara, a renowned betazoid expert in interspecies relations. As the days passed, the research continued at a feverish pace. The unexpected transmission of a vast genetic database from the orbiting Exerlac fleet added fuel to the scientific fire, providing new avenues for exploration and experimentation. Dr. Vaughn and her team worked tirelessly, poring over the new data. It was during one late-night session that they made a breakthrough. "Admiral," Dr. Vaughn called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "We've found something extraordinary in the trio's DNA. There's a unique sequence. It's like a genetic key that allows for rapid adaptation to new genetic material." The implications of this discovery sent shockwaves through the station. Captain Garak immediately began lobbying for the creation of enhanced soldiers, while Counselor Zorn rallied support for strict regulations on genetic modification. Amidst the growing political turmoil, Darren, Astra, and Vex found themselves grappling with the intense intimacy of their shared consciousness. Their every thought, fear, and desire flowed freely between them, leading to moments of profound connection and occasional discomfort. As they lay in their specially designed quarters one night, their minds intertwined, Astra voiced the question they'd all been avoiding. What are we becoming? Are we still individuals, or are we evolving into something more? Before either Darren or Vex could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A group of radical anti-hybrid activists, led by a charismatic Andorian named Thelos, had launched an attack on the research facility. The trio sprang into action, their movements perfectly synchronized. Using their space-time manipulation abilities, they contained the threat, working in harmony with station security to neutralize the attackers. As the dust settled and the last of the activists were led away, Admiral Frost approached the trio. Her expression was a mix of gratitude and concern. "You've proven your value to this station once again," she said quietly. "But this incident has made it clear that we need to address the larger implications of your existence and this research. I'm convening a galactic summit to establish guidelines for hybrid technology use." As Frost walked away to begin preparations for the summit, Darren, Astra, and Vex exchanged glances. They could feel their shared consciousness expanding, evolving into something beyond their individual selves. The station buzzed with anticipation as delegates began to arrive for the Galactic Summit. In the Research Institute, Dr. Vaughn and her team continued their work, pushing the boundaries of genetic science and interspecies cooperation. The fate of the hybrid trio and the future of genetic research hung in the balance as the next critical phase of their journey approached. As the station buzzed with anticipation for the upcoming Galactic Summit, an unexpected development in the Research Institute sent shockwaves through the entire facility. Darren, Astra, and Vex, the hybrid trio at the center of the groundbreaking genetic research, underwent a sudden and dramatic physiological change. Dr. Vaughn was in the middle of a routine examination when she noticed an unusual reading on her instruments. "That's odd," she muttered, frowning at the display. "Your endocrine levels are spiking across the board." Before she could investigate further, the air in the lab seemed to thicken. A potent, almost tangible aura emanated from the trio, causing the research team to stumble and sway. "What's happening?" Darren asked, his voice strained as he felt his body changing once again. Dr. Vaughn's eyes widened as she realized what was occurring. "You're emitting some kind of pheromone. It's affecting everyone in the vicinity." The effect was immediate and intense. The research team found themselves overwhelmed by a surge of heightened emotions and arousal. Even the typically stoic Vulcan scientist, Cellular, showed visible signs of agitation, her carefully controlled facade cracking under the influence of the powerful chemical signals. Astra gasped, feeling the impact of their new ability through their shared consciousness. "We need to contain this now." Acting quickly, Dr. Vaughn activated the lab's emergency quarantine protocols. Force fields sprang to life, isolating the hybrid trio from the rest of the team. As the effects of the pheromones dissipated, the research team struggled to regain their composure. Admiral Frost arrived minutes later, her face a mask of concern. "Report, Doctor. What exactly are we dealing with?" Dr. Vaughn, still visibly flustered, explained the situation. "It appears the trio has developed the ability to produce a highly potent pheromone. It affects all species we've observed so far, inducing a state of heightened arousal and emotional receptivity." Frost's brow furrowed as she considered the implications. "Can it be controlled?" "We're working on a suppressant now," Dr. Vaughn replied. gesturing to her team who were already hard at work. But it's going to take time to develop something fully effective. Over the next few days, the Research Institute worked tirelessly to create a temporary solution. The suppressant they developed required frequent reapplication and careful monitoring, but it allowed the trio to interact with others without causing unintended effects. As news of this development spread, reactions among the station's inhabitants were mixed. Some saw it as a fascinating breakthrough with potential benefits for diplomacy and conflict resolution. Others, like Counselor Zorn, viewed it as a dangerous and unethical form of manipulation. In a heated council meeting, Zorn's voice boomed through the chamber. "This is unacceptable. We cannot allow these living weapons to roam freely during the summit. They must be isolated for the safety and integrity of the proceedings." Captain Garak, however, saw things differently. "Counselor, you're missing the bigger picture. This ability could revolutionize interstellar diplomacy. Imagine the conflicts we could determination, the understanding we could foster." Admiral Frost listened to both arguments, her mind racing with possibilities. Finally, she spoke. "Gentlemen, I believe there's a middle ground here. We can use this ability to our advantage, but in a controlled, ethical manner." She outlined her plan to create a special environment during the summit where delegates could voluntarily experience the effects of the pheromones. It could foster empathy and understanding among species that have been at odds for centuries, she explained. As the debate raged on, the hybrid trio found themselves grappling with the implications of their new ability. In their quarters, Darren, Astra, and Vex sat in a circle, their minds intertwined through their deepening bond. "I can feel everything you're feeling," Vex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's overwhelming." Astra nodded, her eyes closed in concentration. "We're becoming something more than just three individuals. But what does that mean for us? For our future?" Darren reached out, taking both their hands in his. "I don't know, but whatever we're becoming, we're in this together." Their moment of connection was interrupted by an alert from station security. The anti-hybrid activist group, led by Thelos, had been detected attempting to infiltrate the station disguised as maintenance workers. Without hesitation, the trio sprang into action. Using their space-time manipulation abilities, they coordinated with station security to expose and apprehend the infiltrators. Their synchronized movements and shared consciousness allowed them to anticipate and counter every move the activists made. As the last of the infiltrators was led away in restraints, Admiral Frost approached the trio. "Impressive work," she said, her voice tinged with both admiration and concern. "But this incident highlights the need for increased security measures." She informed them of her decision to implement mandatory genetic scans for all summit attendees, a move that was already causing friction among some of the arriving delegates. As they discussed the security situation, a priority alert came through from the XR-LAC fleet still orbiting the station. An unknown vessel had been detected approaching the sector, its technology far beyond anything they had encountered before. Admiral Frost's expression grew grave as she considered this new development. She turned to the hybrid trio, her eyes searching their faces. "I need your insights on this. With your enhanced abilities and access to XR-LAC knowledge, you might be our best chance at understanding what we're dealing with." Darren, Astra, and Vex exchanged glances, their shared consciousness already processing the information at an incredible speed. They could feel the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders, knowing that their actions in the coming days could shape the future of not just the station, but potentially the entire galactic community. As they began to formulate a plan, the station hummed with nervous energy. The Galactic Summit loomed on the horizon, bringing with it a convergence of scientific breakthroughs, political tensions, and the unknown threat of the approaching vessel. The hybrid trio stood at the center of it all, their unique abilities and deepening bond poised to play a crucial role in the events to come. As the hybrid trio prepared for their crucial role in the upcoming Galactic Summit, the space station buzzed with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Admiral Frost's plan to utilize their unique pheromone abilities was met with both hope and skepticism from various quarters. On the morning of the summit, Darren, Astra, and Vex stood before Dr. Vaughn, who was making final adjustments to their modified containment suits. The sleek, form-fitting garments were designed to allow controlled release of their pheromones while maintaining their comfort and mobility. "Remember," Dr. Vaughn said, her voice tinged with concern, "these suits are calibrated to release a steady, low-level dose of pheromones. If you feel any unusual sensations or loss of control, activate the emergency suppression system immediately." The trio nodded in unison, their shared consciousness allowing them to process the information simultaneously. As they made their way to the main conference hall, they could feel the weight of responsibility settling on their shoulders. The cavernous hall was a sea of diverse life forms as delegates from across the galaxy took their seats. Admiral Frost stood at the podium, her commanding presence drawing all eyes as she called the summit to order. "Distinguished delegates," she began, her voice firm and clear, "we gather here today to address the challenges and opportunities presented by recent advancements in hybrid technology and interspecies cooperation." As the opening statements commenced, Darren, Astra, and Vex took their positions at strategic points around the room. They focused on maintaining a calm, steady output of pheromones, their shared consciousness allowing them to fine-tune their efforts in real time. The effect was subtle at first. Delegates who had arrived with tense postures and guarded expressions began to relax. The atmosphere in the room shifted, becoming more open and receptive. Even Counselor Zorn, known for his hardline stance against hybrid research, seemed less combative as he delivered his statement. Captain Garak, representing the faction in favor of expanded hybrid programs, spoke passionately about the potential benefits. "Imagine a galaxy where our differences become our strengths," he said, his words carrying a newfound weight in the pheromone-influenced atmosphere, "where we can adapt to any challenge, explore any frontier." As the discussions progressed, the trio noticed a change in the effectiveness of their pheromone output. The suppressant developed by Dr. Vaughn was beginning to falter, allowing their influence to grow stronger than intended. Darren felt it first, a surge of power that threatened to overwhelm him. Through their bond, he communicated his concern to Astra and Vex. They tried to compensate, but the increasing potency of their pheromones was becoming difficult to control. The delegates, unaware of the growing issue, continued their deliberations with unprecedented cooperation. Species that had been at odds for centuries found common ground, their animosities melting away under the influence of the intensifying pheromones. Suddenly, an urgent alert flashed across the room's holoscreens. The unknown alien vessel, detected earlier, had entered the star system. Admiral Frost's comm link buzzed with incoming reports from the XRLAC fleet as they moved to intercept. The Admiral's face remained composed as she addressed the delegates. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are monitoring a situation that requires my attention. We will take a brief recess." As the delegates began to murmur amongst themselves, Darren, Astra, and Vex felt a sudden, intense surge of energy course through their bodies. Their shared consciousness expanded rapidly, their individual identities blurring as they began to move and react as a single entity. A visible aura of energy surrounded them, pulsing with an otherworldly light. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated, causing delegates to stumble and grab onto nearby fixtures for support. Dr. Vaughn, who had been monitoring the situation from a nearby lab, rushed into the conference hall. "Admiral," she called out, her voice urgent, "we need to remove them immediately. Their physiological synchronization is accelerating beyond our predictions." Admiral Frost nodded sharply, her training kicking in as she assessed the situation. "Security team, escort our hybrid guests to the medical bay. All delegates, please remain in your seats. We will resume shortly." As the security team approached, the trio moved in perfect unison, their movements fluid and precise. The aura around them intensified, causing the approaching officers to hesitate. We are fine," the trio spoke as one, their voices overlapping in an unsettling harmony. "We can control this." But even as they spoke, another wave of energy pulsed through them, causing the station's lights to flicker. Recognizing the potential danger, they allowed themselves to be led from the conference hall. In the ensuing chaos, Counselor Zorn seized the opportunity to address the rattled delegates. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice cutting through the din, "what we have witnessed today is clear evidence of the dangers posed by unregulated hybrid experimentation. I move that we vote immediately on suspending this research program before it threatens the safety of the entire galaxy. As murmurs of agreement began to spread through the crowd, Admiral Frost's comm link chimed with an urgent message. The unknown alien vessel had initiated communication with the station. The situation in the conference hall faded to the background as Frost focused on the incoming transmission. The ship's occupants identified themselves as the Zygorians, a name that sent a ripple of excitement through the station's senior staff. "This is Admiral Frost of Starbase Horizon," she responded, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "We welcome peaceful contact with the Zygorian people." As the communication continued, Frost learned of the Zygorians' interest in the hybrid research being conducted on the station. Their request to send a delegation to observe and potentially contribute to the summit added yet another layer of complexity to the already volatile situation. In the medical bay, Dr. Vaughn and her team worked feverishly to stabilize the condition of Darren, Astra, and Vex. The trio lay on separate biobeds, their bodies still moving in perfect synchronization despite the physical distance between them. As the station's governing council debated the merits of allowing the Zygorian delegation to board, and the summit delegates argued over the future of hybrid research, the hope of the universe seemed to hang in the balance. The hybrid trio, at the center of it all, continued to evolve in ways no one had anticipated, their shared consciousness reaching out to touch the very fabric of space and time itself. As the station's governing council debated the merits of allowing the Zygorian delegation to board, Admiral Frost made a decisive call. She authorized the Zygorians to dock, recognizing their potential to assist with the escalating hybrid situation. Within hours of the Zygorian arrival, the atmosphere on the station shifted dramatically. Admiral Frost, in consultation with Dr. Vaughn and the newly arrived Dr. Cellular, the Zygorian chief scientist, implemented strict containment protocols for the hybrid trio. Darren, Astra, and Vex found themselves being escorted from the medical bay to a specialized quarantine facility within the Research Institute. The facility, a marvel of engineering, gleamed with a combination of familiar human technology and alien Zygorian bioengineering enhancements. As they entered the facility, Dr. Vaughn explained, "This space has been designed to suppress your uncontrolled power manifestations while allowing us to continue our research. It's for your safety and the safety of everyone on this station." The trio exchanged glances, their shared consciousness pulsing with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The room was circular, with 3 biobeds arranged in a triangular formation at its center. The walls shimmered with a faint blue energy field, a clear indication of the advanced containment measures in place. Dr. Cellular, a tall, slender being with iridescent skin and large almond-shaped eyes, approached the trio. "Greeting," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality. "I am here to assist in stabilizing your condition. We will be using a series of non-invasive bioresonance treatments." The Zygorian scientist guided them to 3 large cylindrical tanks filled with a shimmering, translucent gel. "This biogel," she explained, "will help regulate your pheromone output and space-time manipulation abilities. It's perfectly safe, I assure you." As Darren, Astra, and Vex were submerged in the tanks, they felt a cool, tingling sensation envelop their bodies. Their shared consciousness buzzed with the new sensory input, processing the unfamiliar experience collectively. Days passed as the treatments continued. The hybrid trio underwent a series of physiological changes that fascinated the research team. Their skin began to develop a subtle, iridescent quality, shifting colors based on their emotional state. During one treatment session, Dr. Vaughn noticed Darren's skin shimmer with a soft blue hue. "Fascinating," she murmured, making notes on her datapad. "It seems your new dermal properties are providing us with a visual indicator of your collective mood." As the treatments progressed, the station continued to buzz with activity. The Galactic summit resumed under heightened security measures, with Captain Garak's Orion forces implementing advanced screening procedures for all delegates. The new security measures, utilizing Zygorian technology, led to an unexpected discovery. Several delegates were found to be carrying concealed bio-augmentations, causing a diplomatic incident that threatened to derail the summit. In the midst of this chaos, Counselor Zorn saw an opportunity. He called for an emergency session of the summit, his voice ringing out in the packed conference hall. Esteemed colleagues, he began, his eyes scanning the room. Recent events have made it clear that unregulated genetic modification poses a grave threat to our galactic community. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Zorn continued. I propose a galaxy-wide ban on unauthorized genetic experimentation. We cannot risk another incident like the one we witnessed with the hybrid trio. Support for Zorn's proposal grew among the more conservative factions, putting Admiral Frost in a difficult position. She knew she had to act quickly to prevent the summit from spiraling out of control. After consulting with Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Xylera, Frost made a bold decision. She authorized a controlled demonstration of the hybrid trio's stabilized abilities before a select committee of delegates. Under close supervision, Darren, Astra, and Vex were brought before the committee. Their skins shimmered with a mix of green and gold, reflecting their excitement and nervousness. Delegates, Admiral Frost addressed the group, you are about to witness the potential benefits of controlled hybrid abilities. We have asked our trio to analyze and propose solutions to some of the most complex logistical issues facing your worlds. As the demonstration began, the hybrid trio's shared consciousness kicked into high gear. They moved in perfect synchronization, their hands flying over holographic displays as they processed vast amounts of data. The delegates watched in awe as the trio rapidly dissected and solved problems that had plagued their worlds for years. Trade route optimizations, resource allocation strategies, and climate stabilization plans materialized before their eyes. As the demonstration concluded, even the most skeptical delegates seemed impressed. The hybrid trio had maintained control throughout, showcasing the positive applications of their abilities. However, the prolonged use of their powers began to take its toll. As they were escorted back to their quarantine facility, Darren, Astra, and Vex felt a sudden surge of shared physical arousal. Their containment suits, pushed to their limits, began to malfunction. Alarms blared as concentrated pheromones leaked into the station's air filtration system. Within minutes, the effects spread throughout the station. Delegates, staff, and residents alike experienced a wave of increased heart rates, dilated pupils, and a general state of arousal. Admiral Frost's voice came over the station-wide communication system, steady despite the crisis. Attention all personnel and guests. We are initiating an emergency lockdown of all non-essential areas. Please remain in your current locations until further notice. As medical teams rushed to distribute pheromone suppressants, the hybrid trio was quickly isolated in a sealed chamber within their quarantine facility. Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Xylera worked frantically to stabilize their condition and repair the malfunctioning containment suits. In the aftermath of the incident, Admiral Frost found herself facing mounting pressure from both the station's governing council and the summit delegates. As she stood in her office, looking out at the stars beyond the station, she knew that the coming days would require all of her diplomatic skills and strategic thinking. The hybrid trio, now more intimately connected than ever due to their shared experience, lay in their isolation chamber. Their skin pulsed with a deep purple hue, reflecting their complex mix of emotions. As they processed the events of the past few days through their collective consciousness, they wondered what challenges and opportunities the future would bring, both for themselves and for the delicate balance of interspecies relations in the galaxy. Galaxy. As they lay there, connected by their shared experiences and evolving abilities, the station around them continued to buzz with activity. Admiral Frost stood in her office, her eyes fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. The recent pheromone incident had pushed the already delicate situation to a breaking point. She knew that drastic measures were needed to maintain control and salvage the summit. With a determined nod, she tapped her comm badge. Dr. Vaughn, Dr. Xylera, report to my office immediately. Within minutes, the two scientists arrived, their faces etched with concern. We need a new strategy, Frost began without preamble. The current containment measures are clearly insufficient. I want a specialized habitat constructed for our hybrid guests, one that can accommodate their unique needs while allowing for controlled interaction with others on the station. Dr. Vaughn's eyes lit up. Admiral, I believe we can modify the Research Institute's auxiliary wing for this purpose. With the right adjustments, we could create a safe, monitored environment for them. Dr. Zylera nodded in agreement, her iridescent skin shimmering slightly. I concur. Furthermore, I propose we develop an advanced biodampening field to regulate their pheromone emissions. My people have experience with similar technology. Frost listened intently as the two scientists outlined their plan. The new habitat would feature a network of emitters throughout, capable of fine-tuning the range and intensity of the pheromones. Fail-safes would be implemented to prevent any unintended releases. Make it happen, Frost ordered. I want construction to begin immediately. As the habitat took shape over the following days, Frost turned her attention to the resumed Galactic Summit. The incident had left many delegates wary, but she saw an opportunity to shift the narrative. Standing before the assembled representatives, Frost introduced a bold new proposal. Esteemed delegates, recent events have highlighted both the risks and potential of hybrid technology. I propose a joint research initiative focused on practical applications of this groundbreaking field. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Frost continued, outlining potential benefits in medicine, space exploration, and interspecies communication. To bolster her case, she announced a series of carefully monitored experiments showcasing the hybrid trio's abilities. Under strict supervision, Darren, Astra, and Vex were brought to a specially prepared simulation chamber. The assembled delegates watched in awe as the trio navigated complex virtual scenarios, from hostile alien environments to extreme gravitational conditions. Their shared consciousness allowed them to process and adapt at an unprecedented rate. In one particularly impressive display, they manipulated local space-time fields to navigate a simulated black hole, demonstrating potential breakthroughs in deep space travel. As news of these successful trials spread, the atmosphere on the station began to shift. Many previously skeptical delegates now saw the potential benefits of hybrid research. However, Counselor Zorn remained steadfast in his opposition. This is nothing more than a well-orchestrated show, Zorn declared, addressing a group of like-minded delegates. We cannot allow ourselves to be swayed by parlor tricks when the very fabric of our societies is at stake. The counselor's words found purchase among the more conservative factions. Soon a resolution was proposed to limit the scope of hybrid experimentation and impose strict regulations on future development. As tensions rose within the summit, construction on the new habitat reached completion. Darren, Astra, and Vex were carefully transferred to their new living quarters, a circular chamber filled with advanced monitoring systems and customizable environmental controls. As they settled into their new surroundings, something unexpected occurred. The trio's bodies began to emit a soft, pulsating light, their skins shimmering with bioluminescence. Dr. Vaughn, observing from a nearby monitoring station, leaned in closer to her screens. Fascinating, she murmured. It appears to be linked to their emotional states. Dr. Cellular joined her, her large eyes widening with interest. Not just that, she said, pointing to a data readout. The light pulses are carrying complex information. They're communicating. The two scientists watched in amazement as Darren, Astra, and Vex exchanged rapid flashes of light, conveying vast amounts of data in seconds. This new development opened up exciting possibilities for information transfer and data processing. As the summit entered its final days, Admiral Frost prepared for a crucial presentation. She planned to showcase the cumulative findings of the hybrid research program, including a live demonstration of the trio's newly discovered bioluminescent communication. However, as the station buzzed with anticipation, an alert sounded in the security center. Captain Garak's voice crackled over the comm system. Admiral, we've detected an unauthorized access attempt in the main computer core. Initial scans suggest it may be linked to anti-hybrid activists. Frost's expression resolute. Lock down all critical systems. I want those infiltrators found, Captain. As Orion's security forces mobilized to track down the intruders, Frost faced a difficult decision. The security breach had created a tense atmosphere, with delegates divided over whether to proceed with the hybrid technology demonstration. In the specialized habitat, Darren, Astra, and Vex sensed the growing unrest. Their skin pulsed with a mix of colors, reflecting their shared anxiety and persistence. They knew that their role in the unfolding events would be crucial, not just for their own future, but for the future of hybrid research and interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. As alarms blared and security teams rushed through the station's corridors, the hybrid trio exchanged a silent, luminous conversation. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their unique abilities in deepening bond preparing them for the trials to come. As alarms blared and security teams rushed through the station's corridors, Admiral Frost stood resolute in her office. The growing unrest threatened to unravel everything they had worked for, but she refused to let fear dictate their actions. With a determined nod, she tapped her comm badge. Captain Garak, prepare a security detail. We're proceeding with the hybrid technology demonstration. Admiral, Garak's voice crackled through the comm. Are you certain? The situation is highly volatile. I am, Frost replied. This demonstration could be the key to resolving our conflicts. Have your team ready in 5 minutes. Frost strode purposefully towards the hybrid trio's habitat. As she entered, she found Darren, Astra, and Vex huddled together, their skin pulsing with a kaleidoscope of colors. It's time, she announced. We need your help to show everyone what you're truly capable of. The trio exchanged silent, luminous glances before nodding in unison. As they stood, their bodies seemed to move as one, perfectly synchronized. Captain Garak arrived with a team of Orion security officers, each equipped with advanced cloaking devices. We're ready, Admiral, he reported. We'll use our cloaking technology to shield them from potential threats. The group moved swiftly through the station's corridors, the security team's cloaking devices rendering them nearly invisible. As they approached the main presentation hall, the hybrid trio's skin began to pulse more rapidly, reflecting their growing anticipation and nervousness. Upon entering the hall, a hush fell over the assembled delegates. Admiral Frost took her place at the podium, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. Esteemed delegates, recent events have tested our willpower, but they have also presented us with an unprecedented opportunity. Today, we will demonstrate the true potential of hybrid technology. At her signal, Darren, Astra, and Vex stepped forward. Their bodies began to emit a soft, pulsating light that quickly intensified. Patterns of light danced across their skin, creating intricate, ever-changing designs that captivated the audience. The delegates watched in awe as the trio's bioluminescent communication unfolded before them. Rapid flashes of light passed between the three, conveying complex information at an astonishing speed. Dr. Vaughn, monitoring the demonstration from a nearby console, leaned towards Dr. Cellular. Their neural synchronization is off the chart, she whispered. They're processing information faster than our instruments can measure. As the demonstration progressed, delegates began posing questions. The hybrid trio responded with lightning speed, their shared consciousness allowing them to analyze and formulate answers almost instantaneously. Counselor Zorn, his earlier skepticism still evident, stood to ask a question. How can we be certain that this technology won't be used to... His words were cut short as the station system suddenly went haywire. Lights flickered erratically, and the temperature in the room began to fluctuate wildly. Panicked murmurs rippled through the crowd as the gravity briefly faltered, causing several delegates to float momentarily before crashing back to the floor. Admiral Frost's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone remain calm. Security teams, initiate emergency protocols. As Captain Garak coordinated with his security forces, Frost turned to the hybrid trio. We need your help. Use your abilities to stabilize the affected areas. Without hesitation, Darren, Astra, and Vex sprang into action. Their bodies began to glow with an intense, otherworldly light as they tapped into their space-time manipulation abilities. The air around them seemed to ripple and bend as they created localized fields of altered space-time. The effects were immediate. The wildly fluctuating temperature stabilized and the erratic gravity normalized. Throughout the station, malfunctioning doors ceased their random opening and closing. As the trio worked tirelessly to contain the crisis, Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular huddled over their instruments, their faces etched with concern. Admiral, Dr. Vaughn called out, her voice tight with urgency. We've made a discovery. The malfunctions. They're not the result of sabotage. It's the hybrid trio. Their evolving abilities are causing quantum fluctuations in the station systems. Admiral Frost's eyes widened as she processed this information. She knew they had to act fast to prevent further damage. With a heavy heart, she activated the station-wide communication system. Attention all personnel and delegates. This is Admiral Frost. We are initiating an immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. Please proceed calmly to your designated evacuation points. As the evacuation began, the hybrid trio's efforts to stabilize the station became increasingly strained. Their bodies emitted powerful energy fields that interfered with nearby equipment, causing consoles to spark and short out. Suddenly, the biodampening systems in their containment suits failed. A wave of concentrated pheromones washed over the remaining inhabitants of the station, eliciting intense emotional and physical responses. Counselor Zorn, caught in the midst of the pheromone release, underwent a startling transformation. His eyes widened and his rigid posture softened. He staggered towards the hybrid trio, his face a mask of wonder and newfound understanding. I can feel what you feel, he gasped. The potential, it's incredible. As the situation spiraled further out of control, Admiral Frost knew she had to make a difficult decision. She turned to Captain Garak, her voice firm despite the chaos surrounding them. Captain, prepare the specialized shuttle. We need to move the hybrid trio off the station immediately. Garak nodded grimly. I'll pilot it myself, Admiral. My experience with Orion's stealth technology will give us the best chance of a safe transfer. As preparations for the shuttle launch began, an alarming change overtook the hybrid trio. Their bodies began to physically merge at a cellular level, their individual forms blurring into a single, shifting entity. Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular worked feverishly to modify the shuttle's containment systems, their fingers flying over control panels as they raced against time. We're almost there, Dr. Cellular called out, her iridescent skin glistening with perspiration. Just a few more adjustments to accommodate their new physiology. As the modified shuttle prepared for launch, the station groaned ominously. Localized gravitational anomalies tore at its structure, threatening to rip it apart at the seams. Admiral Frost stood at the shuttle bay doors, overseeing the final stages of the evacuation. She watched as the merged hybrid entity was carefully guided into the shuttle, their combined form pulsing with otherworldly energy. Captain Garak took his place in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls despite the chaos erupting around them. As the shuttle's engines roared to life, Admiral Frost's voice came through the comm system one last time. Godspeed, Captain. The fate of the station, the summit, and perhaps the entire galaxy now rests in your hands. The shuttle lifted off, carrying its precious and potentially dangerous cargo into the vastness of space. As it disappeared from view, Admiral Frost turned back to face the crumbling station, knowing that the true challenges were only just beginning. The shuttle's engines roared to life, propelling it away from the crumbling station and into the vast expanse of space. Captain Garak's hands moved swiftly across the control panel, activating the Orion stealth technology. The shuttle's exterior shimmered and seemed to fade into the starry backdrop. Stealth systems engaged, he reported, his voice taut with concentration. Inside the shuttle's specialized containment area, the merged form of Darren, Astra, and Vex pulsed with otherworldly energy. Their combined mass grew rapidly, pressing against the reinforced walls. Dr. Vaughn's voice crackled over the comm system. Captain, the containment field is struggling to adapt. Their physiology is evolving faster than we anticipated. Garak's grip tightened on the controls as the shuttle lurched. Understood, adjusting course to compensate for the increased mass. As they hurtled towards the nearby uninhabited planet, the hybrid entity's bioluminescent pulses intensified. Brilliant flashes of light flooded the shuttle's interior, interfering with the navigation systems. Warning klaxons blared. Garak's fingers flew across the controls, bypassing the malfunctioning systems. Switching to manual navigation, he announced, his eyes fixed on the interface. The planet loomed before them, a swirling orb of blues and greens. As they approached its atmosphere, the hybrid entity's space-time manipulation abilities activated without warning. Reality warped around the shuttle, stars stretched into streaks of light, then snapped back into pinpoints. The planet's surface seemed to rush towards them, then recede in the blink of an eye. Garak fought to maintain control, his muscles straining against the temporal shifts. "We're caught in some kind of localized time distortion," he shouted over the comm. "Brace for a rough entry." The shuttle plunged into the planet's atmosphere, trailing fire as it phased in and out of normal space-time. Garak's expert piloting kept them on course, but each temporal shift threatened to tear the vessel apart. On the planet's surface, Dr. Zylara monitored the incoming shuttle's erratic descent. "Activate the quantum stabilizers," she ordered, her large eyes fixed on the facility's main view screen. A series of massive pylons surrounding the landing zone hummed to life, projecting an invisible field designed to counteract the space-time anomalies. The shuttle broke through the cloud cover, its hull glowing red-hot from atmospheric entry. It lurched and shuddered, fighting against the conflicting forces of gravity and temporal distortion. With a bone-jarring impact, the shuttle slammed into the landing zone. It skidded across the ground, leaving a deep furrow in its wake before finally coming to rest. Garak's head swam as he tried to focus on the shuttle's systems. The temporal shifts had left him disoriented, his perception of time skewed. He stumbled from his seat, making his way to the containment area. The hybrid entity's merged form had begun to destabilize the shuttle's structure. Metal groaned and buckled as localized gravity fluctuations pulled it in multiple directions. Outside, Dr. Vaughn led a team toward the shuttle, their protective suits gleaming in the alien sunlight. "We need to move fast," she called out. "The containment field won't hold much longer." As they approached, a surge of energy burst from within the shuttle. The hybrid entity's merged form began to separate, splitting into three distinct but interconnected bodies. The surge overloaded the facility's power systems. Lights flickered and died as containment protocols failed in a cascading wave of shutdowns. Darren, Astra, and Vex, their bodies still in flux, phased through the physical barriers of the shuttle and facility. They hovered in midair, connected by tendrils of shimmering energy. Objects around them began to float, caught in localized gravity distortions. Dr. Cellular ducked as a piece of equipment sailed over her head. "We need to stabilize them now," she shouted to Dr. Vaughn. Working in tandem, the two scientists activated a modified version of the biodampening fields, combined with Zygorian bioresonance technology. The hybrid trio's rapid physiological changes slowed, but didn't stop entirely. In orbit, ships from various species began to appear, their sensors locked onto the energy signatures emanating from the planet's surface. The standoff that had begun at the summit now shifted to this new arena. Captain Garak, shaking off the last effects of temporal disorientation, emerged from the shuttle. He surveyed the chaos around him and immediately began establishing a defensive perimeter. "Set up a protective cordon," he ordered the security team that had accompanied the shuttle. "Use whatever Orion protocols we have available. We need to secure this area now." As the situation on the ground grew more complex, the hybrid trio's bodies continued to stabilize. Their new form combined aspects of their original species with entirely novel biological structures. Suddenly, a coherent burst of energy erupted from the trio, temporarily disrupting all communications and sensor systems across the planet and in orbit. In the ensuing silence, Dr. Vaughn turned to Dr. Cellular, her face etched with a mix of awe and concern. "What we're witnessing here, it's beyond anything we could have imagined." Dr. Cellular nodded, her large eyes reflecting the shimmering forms of Darren, Astra, and Vex. "The question is, what happens next? And how do we protect them, and ourselves, from those who would exploit this power?" As if in response, the hybrid trio generated a protective energy field around the facility. It shimmered into existence, a translucent dome that separated them from the chaos of the outside world. Captain Garak's comm unit crackled to life, Admiral Frost's voice cutting through the static. "Status report, Captain. What's the situation on the ground?" Garak looked at the floating forms of the hybrid trio, then at the shimmering energy dome surrounding them. "Admiral," he replied, his voice grave, "I think we're going to need reinforcements." "More reinforcements," Garak replied, his voice grave. "The situation here is unprecedented." As the protective energy dome shimmered around them, Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular wasted no time in initiating a series of comprehensive tests to understand the hybrid trio's new physiological state. The research team set up portable equipment, their movements precise and efficient despite the lingering chaos. Darren, Astra, and Vex hovered in the center of the dome, their bodies distinct yet connected by tendrils of pulsating energy. Dr. Vaughn approached cautiously, holding out a device that emitted a soft pulsing light. "We're going to start with a basic biometric scan," she explained, her voice calm despite the tension evident in her posture. "Try to remain as still as possible." As the scan commenced, the hybrid trio's bodies began to emit a faint, multicolored glow. Dr. Cellular's eyes widened as she analyzed the incoming data. "Incredible," she murmured, her fingers dancing across a holographic display. "Their cellular structure has undergone a complete transformation. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Over the next few hours, the research team conducted a battery of tests, each revealing new aspects of the hybrid trio's enhanced abilities. During a pheromone analysis, Dr. Vaughn made a startling discovery. "Look at this," she called out to Dr. Cellular, gesturing to a real-time holographic representation of the trio's pheromone output. "They're not just producing pheromones passively anymore. They're controlling the process." As if in response, the hybrid trio began to modulate their pheromone production. The air around them shimmered with barely visible particles, each pulse carrying a different emotional signature. Captain Garak, overseeing the security perimeter, suddenly felt a wave of calm wash over him. His tense muscles relaxed, and he found himself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. "Fascinating," Dr. Vaughn breathed, making rapid notes. "They've developed the ability to target specific individuals with tailored pheromone cocktails. The implications for diplomacy and conflict resolution are enormous." As the testing continued, Admiral Frost's voice crackled over the comm system once more. "Captain Garak, we have a situation developing on the space station." Garak frowned, moving away from the testing area to hear the report clearly. "What kind of situation, Admiral?" There was a pause before Frost responded, her voice tinged with a mixture of confusion and amusement. "It appears the lingering effects of the hybrid pheromones have led to some unexpected romantic entanglements among the remaining crew members." Garak's eyebrows shot up. "Romantic entanglements?" "Several interspecies couples have formed," Frost explained, "including partnerships between humans and alien species previously thought to be incompatible." As Garak processed this information, a commotion at the edge of the security perimeter caught his attention. A small group of figures in sleek dark armor was attempting to breach the facility's defenses. "We have intruders," Garak barked into his comm unit, signaling his security team to high alert. Orion mercenaries by the look of their gear. Before Garak could issue further orders, the hybrid trio reacted. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and the protective energy dome surrounding the facility pulsed brightly. The Orion mercenaries found themselves rebuffed by an invisible force, their weapons and transportation technology rendered useless. Dr. Cellular watched the display with a mixture of awe and scientific curiosity. "Their defensive capabilities have evolved far beyond our initial projections," she noted, her fingers flying across her datapad. As the mercenaries retreated, frustrated by their failure to penetrate the barrier, the orbiting ships took notice. Several species, including the Sarlacc and Zygorians, began transmitting requests to open negotiations. Admiral Frost's voice came through the comm once more, this time with a note of cautious optimism. "Captain, it seems our hybrid friends have inadvertently provided us with a diplomatic opportunity. I'm proposing a series of controlled demonstrations in exchange for a non-aggression pact. It might be our best chance to de-escalate the situation up here." As preparations for these demonstrations began, Dr. Cellular made another breakthrough. She had been studying cellular samples from the hybrid trio when she noticed something extraordinary. "Dr. Vaughn, you need to see this," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement. Their cellular structure, it's not just stable, it's adaptable on a fundamental level. Dr. Vaughn hurried over, her eyes widening as she examined the data. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Dr. Cellular nodded, her large eyes shining. They can temporarily incorporate genetic traits from other species through direct physical contact. I'm calling it genetic assimilation. To test this new ability, the research team carefully introduced the hybrid trio to various alien plant and animal species native to the planet. The results were astonishing. Darren, Astra, and Vex successfully assimilated beneficial traits, gaining enhanced photosynthesis capabilities and resistance to extreme temperatures. As news of these developments spread, the planetary research facility became a hub of scientific and diplomatic activity. Representatives from various species began to arrive, eager to witness the hybrid trio's abilities firsthand. Captain Grok found himself facing a new challenge, balancing security concerns with the need for openness and cooperation. He set up additional checkpoints and increased patrols, all while maintaining a welcoming demeanor for the incoming delegates. Throughout this period of intense activity, the hybrid trio's bond continued to evolve. Their shared consciousness expanded, allowing them to process and analyze vast amounts of data from their interactions with different species. Dr. Vaughn, noticing the strain that constant testing and demonstrations put on the trio, implemented a series of recreational activities. These simulations were designed to help them relax and integrate their new abilities into daily life. During one such simulation, something unexpected occurred. The hybrid trio created a localized temporal bubble around themselves, experiencing time at a different rate than their surroundings. They moved with lightning speed, reacting to simulated threats faster than the eye could follow. As the day drew to a close, Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular sat in the makeshift command center, reviewing the mountain of data they had collected. The hybrid trio rested nearby, their bodies still connected by shimmering tendrils of energy. What we've witnessed today, Dr. Vaughn said softly, it's beyond anything we could have imagined. The potential applications of this technology. Dr. Cellular nodded, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. The question is, how do we proceed from here? The galaxy will never be the same after this. Outside the facility, the alien sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. In orbit, ships from dozens of species maintained their vigil, their sensors trained on the planet below. The next phase of this unprecedented journey was about to begin, and no one could predict where it would lead. As the sun rose on a new day, the research facility buzzed with activity. The hybrid trio's remarkable abilities had transformed the once quiet outpost into a nexus of scientific discovery and interspecies cooperation. Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular, bleary-eyed from their late-night data analysis, reconvened in the command center to plan the day's experiments. We need to focus on practical applications, Dr. Vaughn said, gesturing to a holographic display of the trio's genetic structure. The Zygorian delegation arrives today, and they're particularly interested in medical applications. Dr. Cellular nodded, her large eyes blinking rapidly as she processed the information. Agreed. I've been working on a protocol to test their genetic assimilation abilities in a controlled medical setting. As they discussed the details, Captain Grok entered the room, his posture tense. Doctors, the Zygorian ship has just entered orbit. They're requesting permission to land. Dr. Vaughn straightened her lab coat. Well, let's not keep them waiting. This could be the breakthrough we've been hoping for. The Zygorian delegation, led by a tall, willowy scientist named Dr. Zexura, arrived with an air of terrifying excitement. After a brief tour of the facility, they gathered in the main laboratory where Darren, Astra, and Vex waited, their bodies shimmering with latent energy. Dr. Zexura approached the trio, her elongated fingers dancing across a datapad. We've brought genetic samples from individuals suffering from rare disorders. Our hope is that you can assimilate the healthy genetic material and transfer it to the affected individuals. The hybrid trio exchanged glances, their shared consciousness allowing for silent communication. Darren spoke for the group, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. We're prepared to try. However, we should proceed with caution. Our abilities are still evolving, and we cannot predict all outcomes. Over the next several hours, the research team carefully guided the hybrid trio through a series of experiments. They started with simple genetic transfers, gradually increasing in complexity. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Genetic defects that had plagued individuals for generations were corrected in a matter of minutes. As word of their success spread, the facility's communication channels were flooded with requests from pharmaceutical companies and research institutions across the galaxy. Admiral Frost, monitoring the situation from orbit, sent a priority message to Captain Garak. Captain, the Galactic Council is requesting we host a conference on the ethical implications of this technology. Prepare the facility for an influx of high-ranking officials. Garak's face tightened with concern. Understood, Admiral. I'll increase security measures immediately. As preparations for the conference began, Dr. Vaughn noticed a troubling development. The hybrid trio's physical forms were becoming increasingly unstable, their bodies occasionally merging and separating involuntarily. Dr. Zylara, she called out urgently, we need to develop a stabilization technique. Their molecular structure is fluctuating at an alarming rate. The two scientists worked tirelessly, combining Zygorian bioresonance technology with modified quantum stabilizers. They managed to create a temporary solution just as the first delegates began to arrive for the conference. The gathering of diverse species brought new challenges. The hybrid trio's ability to manipulate pheromones became a source of concern among the delegates. Admiral Frost, ever the diplomat, implemented strict protocols requiring the trio to wear modified containment suits during official proceedings. Despite these precautions, the conference was not without incident. During a crucial negotiation between the Exarlach and Zagorian representatives, the hybrid trio's physical forms suddenly merged, causing a wave of startled gasps and nervous laughter to ripple through the assembly. Dr. Vaughn rushed to their side, activating the stabilizers. As the trio's forms separated, she whispered, I know it's uncomfortable, but try to maintain control. There's too much at stake. The incident, while embarrassing, had an unexpected effect. Many delegates found themselves sympathizing with the trio's struggle, seeing them not as abstract scientific marvels, but as individuals grappling with extraordinary circumstances. As the conference progressed, Admiral Frost proposed the creation of an intergalactic hybrid oversight committee. The suggestion sparked heated debate among the delegates, with passionate arguments erupting on both sides. Amidst the political maneuvering, Dr. Zylara made a startling discovery. She burst into a meeting between Dr. Vaughn and Captain Garak, her eyes wide with excitement. The trio's space-time manipulation abilities, she said breathlessly, they're not limited to themselves. They can extend the effect to other objects and individuals. Captain Garak's eyebrows shot up. The implications of that are enormous, Dr. Vaughn finished. We need to inform Admiral Frost immediately. As news of this development spread, representatives from various time-sensitive industries began approaching the research team with proposals and requests. The already complex negotiations surrounding hybrid technology regulation became even more intricate. Tensions rose among the smaller, less influential species who feared being left behind in the technological race. Admiral Frost, recognizing the potential for conflict, called an emergency meeting with the hybrid trio and the lead scientists. We need a demonstration, she said, her holographic form flickering slightly. Something that shows the potential for this technology to benefit all species equally. Darren, Astra, and Vex nodded in unison, their bodies pulsing with energy. We have an idea, they said, their voices blending into one, but it will push our abilities to their limits. As the conference neared its conclusion, anticipation built for the hybrid trio's final demonstration. They spent hours in deep meditation, preparing to combine their genetic assimilation and temporal manipulation abilities in ways they had never attempted before. The research facility, once a quiet outpost on an uninhabited planet, now stood at the center of a galactic storm. As delegates from across the known universe gathered for the demonstration, the hybrid trio prepared to unleash the full potential of their evolving abilities. The fate of interspecies cooperation and the future of hybrid technology hung in the balance, with the next few moments poised to reshape the course of galactic history. The hybrid trio stood at the center of the research facility's main auditorium, their bodies shimmering with an otherworldly energy. As the delegates settled into their seats, a palpable tension filled the air. Suddenly, a gasp rippled through the crowd. The trio's forms began to blur and shift, their individual bodies merging into one another. Dr. Vaughn rushed forward, her stabilizers at the ready, but she hesitated as she realized this was no ordinary fluctuation. "Dr. Xylera," she called out, her voice tight with urgency, "we need to recalibrate the stabilizers immediately." The two scientists worked feverishly, their fingers flying over holographic interfaces as they adjusted their equipment to accommodate this unexpected development. The delegates watched in stunned silence as Darren, Astra, and Vex's bodies coalesced into a single humanoid figure. The new entity stood before them, its form a harmonious blend of all three original species. Its skin shimmered with an iridescent quality, and its eyes held a depth that seemed to contain entire galaxies. Dr. Vaughn approached cautiously, her scanner hovering over the merged being. "Can you understand me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The entity nodded, its movements fluid and graceful. When it spoke, its voice resonated with the echoes of Darren, Astra, and Vex. "We are one, yet we are many. Our consciousness has expanded beyond what we thought possible." Admiral Frost's holographic form flickered to life beside them. "This is an unexpected development," she said, her tone measured, but unable to hide a hint of concern. "We need to assess the full extent of your abilities before proceeding with the demonstration." As if in response, the entity's skin began to shift, taking on the textures and colors of its surroundings. Dr. Silara's eyes widened in amazement. "Adaptive camouflage," she breathed. "The applications for this ability alone are staggering." The doors to the auditorium burst open, and a striking figure strode in. Dr. Thera, the Betazoid xenopsychologist, made her way to the front of the room, her dark eyes fixed on the merged entity. "I came as soon as I heard," she said, addressing Admiral Frost. "The psychological implications of this merger are unprecedented. We need to conduct a full assessment immediately." As Dr. Thera began her evaluation, the entity demonstrated an empathic ability that far surpassed anything previously observed. Without the use of pheromones, it was able to sense and influence the emotional states of those around it. Delegates from various species found themselves experiencing a profound sense of connection and understanding. Arguments that had seemed intractable moments before now felt petty and insignificant in the face of this shared empathic experience. Admiral Frost, recognizing the potential for misuse of such an ability, quickly implemented additional security protocols. "We need to ensure that this power is not exploited," she said, her voice firm. "Dr. Vaughn, Dr. Xylera, I want you to work on developing safeguards." As the scientists conferred, a commotion erupted near the entrance to the facility. Captain Garak's voice crackled over the comm system. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel on high alert." The source of the disturbance soon became clear as a group of protesters forced their way into the auditorium. At their head was a familiar face, Garak, the charismatic Tellarite who had spoken out against hybrid research on the space station. "This abomination must be stopped," Garak shouted, brandishing a device that pulsed with an ominous energy. "We cannot allow this threat to the natural order to continue." Captain Garak and his security team moved swiftly, deploying non-lethal countermeasures to subdue the intruders. Stun beams crisscrossed the air as the protesters were systematically disarmed and restrained. Throughout the chaos, the merged entity remained calm, its empathic abilities allowing it to sense the fear and anger driving the protesters' actions. It turned to Admiral Frost, its voice resonating with a newfound wisdom. "We understand their concerns. Perhaps it's time for greater transparency." Admiral Frost nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. "You're right. We need to show the galaxy exactly what we're dealing with here." She turned to address the assembled delegates. "I propose a live, galaxy-wide broadcast of the hybrid entities demonstration." Let every species witness firsthand the potential of this technology. As preparations for the broadcast began, Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular worked tirelessly to create a series of challenges that would showcase the entity's full range of abilities. They designed complex problem-solving scenarios, simulated extreme environments, and prepared a group of volunteers with genetic disorders for a healing demonstration. The entity, now officially designated as Triad by the research team, underwent further changes in the days leading up to the broadcast. Its skin developed a chameleon-like quality, able to change not just color, but texture to match its surroundings perfectly. On the day of the broadcast, billions of viewers across the galaxy tuned in to witness the demonstration. Triad moved through the challenges with a grace and efficiency that left even the most skeptical observers in awe. As Triad navigated a complex temporal maze, manipulating localized fields of space-time to overcome obstacles, Dr. Cellular's voice could be heard providing commentary. The potential applications for this ability in fields such as disaster prevention and environmental restoration are truly groundbreaking, she explained to the rapt audience. The demonstration reached its climax as Triad approached the group of volunteers with genetic disorders. With a gentle touch and a pulse of energy, the entity began to heal them one by one, correcting genetic defects that had plagued their families for generations. Tears of joy and disbelief flowed freely as the volunteers embraced their loved ones, experiencing health and vitality for the first time in their lives. The impact of this moment reverberated across the galaxy, with countless viewers finding their preconceptions about hybrid technology challenged and transformed. As the broadcast concluded, Admiral Frost received an urgent communication from the space station. Her expression grew serious as she listened to the report, her eyes darting to Triad and then to the assembled scientists. "It seems our work here has only just begun," she said, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and trepidation. "The interspecies couples on the station, they're exhibiting some very interesting changes." Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular exchanged glances, their minds already racing with the possibilities. As they gathered around Admiral Frost to hear the details, Triad stood silently, its form shimmering with potential. The next phase of their journey into the unknown was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy would never be the same. As Admiral Frost absorbed the implications of the report from the space station, she turned to address the assembled team. "It seems our work here has only just begun," she said, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and trepidation. "The interspecies couples on the station, they're exhibiting some very interesting changes." Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular exchanged glances, their minds already racing with possibilities. Triad stood silently, its form shimmering with potential. "What kind of changes?" Dr. Vaughn asked, leaning forward with interest. Admiral Frost's holographic form flickered as she pulled up a series of medical scans. Physiological alterations, genetic shifts, and in some cases, the development of entirely new abilities. "We need to investigate this immediately." Without hesitation, Admiral Frost dispatched Dr. Thera to lead a team of xenobiologists and geneticists to the space station. As the Betazoid xenopsychologist prepared for departure, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of another breakthrough. Upon arriving at the space station, Dr. Thera was greeted by a sight that surpassed even her wildest expectations. The interspecies couples had undergone visible transformations, their bodies adapting in ways that defied conventional understanding of genetics. One couple in particular caught her attention. Jake, a human male, and his Xarlac partner Zira approached her, their skin emitting a soft, pulsating glow that shifted through a spectrum of colors. "Dr. Thera," Jake said, extending a hand in greeting. As she shook it, she noticed the bioluminescent patterns on his skin intensify. "We've been told you're here to study us." Syra, her reptilian features softened by an almost ethereal quality, nodded in agreement. "We're eager to understand what's happening to us." Dr. Thera activated her medical scanner, her eyes widening as she processed the data. "Fascinating. Your physiologies have merged in ways I've never seen before. The bioluminescence appears to be linked to your emotional states." Over the next few days, Dr. Thera conducted a series of comprehensive examinations on the couples. She collected genetic samples, performed detailed neural scans, and observed the couples as they interacted with their environment. Meanwhile, back on the research planet, Triad continued to evolve. Its merge form stabilized further, developing a more defined appearance that harmoniously blended features from Darren, Astra, and Vex. Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular watched in amazement as Triad demonstrated an ability to assimilate traits from non-organic materials. "Look at this," Dr. Cellular said, her voice filled with awe as she examined the results of their latest test. Triad just incorporated the molecular structure of our new alloy into its own genetic makeup. The implications for materials science are staggering. As news of these advancements spread across the galaxy, various factions intensified their efforts to gain access to hybrid technology. Admiral Frost found herself inundated with requests, proposals, and thinly veiled threats. The situation came to a head when a consortium of major corporations, led by the Orion Trade Syndicate, approached Admiral Frost with an offer she couldn't ignore. Their spokesperson, a sleek Orion woman with piercing green eyes, laid out their proposal. "Exclusive rights to develop hybrid-derived products," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "In exchange, we offer substantial resources and political support for your research." Admiral Frost's hologram flickered as she considered the offer. "This decision can't be made lightly. I'll need to consult with the Intergalactic Hybrid Oversight Committee." As the emergency session of the committee convened, tensions ran high. Representatives from various species argued passionately, their voices rising as they debated the ethical implications of commercializing hybrid technology. Suddenly, a wave of emotion swept through the room. Committee members found themselves experiencing a surge of empathy, their arguments momentarily forgotten as they were overwhelmed by a sense of shared understanding. Admiral Frost's eyes narrowed as she realized what was happening. "Triad," she said firmly, "you need to control your empathic projection. We can't have you influencing the negotiations, even unintentionally." As enhanced psionic shielding was implemented around the conference room, Dr. Thera's research on the space station took an unexpected turn. She was observing Jake and Zyra in a controlled environment when the lights began to flicker. "What's happening?" she asked, reaching for her communicator. Jake and Zyra looked at each other, their skin pulsing with a bright blue light. I think it's us," Jake said, his voice filled with a mix of wonder and concern. Before Dr. Thera could respond, a series of alarms blared throughout the station. Captain Garok's voice came over the comm system, tense but controlled. "All personnel, we are experiencing power fluctuations across multiple sectors. Implement emergency containment protocols immediately." As the space station's crew scrambled to isolate the affected areas, Dr. Thera watched in fascination as Jake and Zyra unconsciously manipulated the electrical fields around them. She quickly documented her observations, her mind racing with the implications of this new development. Back on the research planet, Triad's condition began to deteriorate. Its merged form flickered and pulsed, occasionally separating into three distinct entities before painfully remerging. Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Cellular worked tirelessly, their faces etched with concern as they adjusted quantum stabilizers and fine-tuned Zagorian bioresonance technology. "We're losing cohesion," Dr. Vaughn shouted over the whine of overworking equipment. "If we can't stabilize them soon—" She didn't need to finish the thought. The consequences of Triad's potential dissolution were too dire to contemplate. As the situation reached a critical point, Admiral Frost received an urgent communication from the Galactic Council. The holographic projection of the Council's spokesperson appeared before her, its features grave. "Admiral," the spokesperson began, "we've received reports of spontaneous genetic mutations among populations exposed to hybrid technology. The mutations are spreading across multiple star systems. We need immediate action to contain this crisis." Admiral Frost's mind raced as she processed the information. The implications were staggering, threatening to upend the delicate balance of interspecies relations across the galaxy. With a heavy heart, she made her decision. "Initiate galaxy-wide quarantine protocols," she ordered, her voice firm despite the weight of the decision. All ships and stations involved in hybrid research are to be placed under strict isolation. No travel between affected areas until we can assess the full extent of these mutations. As her orders were relayed across the galaxy, Admiral Frost turned her attention back to the research planet. She knew that the key to understanding and potentially reversing these mutations lay with Triad and the work being done by Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Zylara. Little did she know that an even greater challenge awaited them, one that would test the limits of their scientific knowledge and push the boundaries of what they thought possible in the vast expanse of the cosmos. Universe. As Admiral Frost contemplated the far-reaching implications of the galactic quarantine, a sudden surge of energy pulsed through the research facility. Alarms blared, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Dr. Vaughn's eyes widened as she watched Triad's form flicker and distort. "Something's happening," she called out, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of warning signals. In that moment, Triad's space-time manipulation abilities intensified beyond anything they had previously observed. The air around the entity shimmered and warped, creating a kaleidoscope of fractured realities. Admiral Frost stepped forward, her hologram flickering as she tried to maintain a stable connection. "Triad? What's going on?" Instead of answering, Triad projected a series of vivid images directly into the minds of everyone present. The research team gasped collectively as they found themselves immersed in a cascade of potential futures. Dr. Zylara gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles turning white. It's showing us something, multiple somethings." The visions unfolded rapidly, each more unsettling than the last. A vast armada of crystalline ships appeared at the edge of the galaxy. Entire worlds were engulfed in shimmering fields of energy, their populations vanishing in an instant. At the center of it all, a collective consciousness pulsed with an insatiable hunger. As the visions faded, Admiral Frost's expression hardened. "The coordinates," she murmured, her mind racing. "They're connected to this somehow." Dr. Vaughn nodded, her face pale. "Whatever Triad just showed us, it's clear we're facing a threat unlike anything we've encountered before." Without hesitation, Admiral Frost opened a secure channel to Captain Grok. "Captain, assemble a joint task force immediately. We need representatives from every major galactic species. We're going to those coordinates." As preparations for the mission began, Dr. Thera arrived from the space station, her research on the interspecies couples in tow. She quickly briefed the team on the genetic mutations and new abilities manifesting among the affected individuals. "These changes," Dr. Thera explained, gesturing to her data, "they're accelerating, and they seem to be linked to Triad's condition somehow." Dr. Zylara frowned, studying the information. "It's as if the hybrid technology is spreading, adapting to different physiologies on its own." As they discussed the implications, Triad's form began to fluctuate more violently. The entity separated into three distinct shapes, Darren, Astra, and Vex, before painfully merging back together. Dr. Vaughn rushed to adjust the quantum stabilizers, her fingers flying over the controls. "We're losing them," she shouted, desperation evident in her voice. Captain Grok's voice crackled over the comm system. "Admiral, the task force is assembled and ready for departure." Admiral Frost nodded, her hologram flickering as she divided her attention between the crisis with Triad and the impending mission. "Launch immediately, Captain. We'll transmit all relevant data to you en route." As the task force's ships broke orbit, heading towards the mysterious coordinates, the research team redoubled their efforts to stabilize Triad. Dr. Thera stepped forward, a determined glint in her eye. "I have an idea," she said, pulling up her research on the interspecies couples. "The hybrid pheromones we've been studying, they might be the key to stabilizing Triad's form." Dr. Zylara's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. "Of course, if we can synthesize a concentrated dose, incorporating genetic material from various affected species, it could provide the stability Triad needs," Dr. Vaughn finished, hope rekindling in her eyes. As they set to work on this new approach, Captain Grok's task force entered the coordinates provided in the cryptic message. The sight that greeted them left even the most seasoned crew members in awe. An ancient space station hung suspended in the void. its architecture unlike anything seen in the known galaxy. Its surface was etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Captain Grok's voice was hushed as he reported back to Admiral Frost. "Admiral, we found something. Something incredible." As the task force prepared to board the station, Dr. Vaughn and Dr. Zylara made a breakthrough in their analysis of the data transmitted from the ancient structure. "This technology," Dr. Zylara breathed, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. "It's beyond anything we've ever encountered. And look at this. There's evidence of a massive quantum field generator." Dr. Vaughn nodded, her expression grim. "A device capable of protecting the entire galaxy. But from what?" Their answer came in the form of another vision from Triad. This time the image was clearer. A highly advanced species, evolved beyond physical form, approaching the galaxy with singular purpose. "The Convergence," Admiral Frost whispered, the name appearing in her mind unbidden. As the task force explored the ancient station, searching for a way to activate its defenses, the situation on the research planet grew dire. Triad's condition worsened, their fluctuations threatening to tear apart the fabric of space-time around them. Dr. Thara worked feverishly, synthesizing the hybrid pheromone treatment. "Almost there," she muttered, her hands steady despite the pressure. Suddenly, alarms blared across every system in the galaxy. Admiral Frost's face paled as she received the report. "They're here," she announced, her voice tight with tension. "The Convergence fleet has been detected at the edge of our galaxy." As panic spread across countless worlds, Dr. Thara completed the pheromone treatment. Without hesitation, she approached Triad's fluctuating form and administered the dose. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Triad's form stabilized, coalescing into a radiant being that seemed to pulse with the combined energy of countless individuals. In that moment, as the Convergence fleet advanced and the ancient station's defenses hummed to life, the fate of the galactic realm hung in the balance. Triad, now stabilized and more powerful than ever, prepared to face the greatest challenge of their existence, a challenge that would determine the future of all sentient life in the galaxy.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.